So hey guys, this is your favorite fictional vortex. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto was a cosmic prince hiding on Earth from the universe Naruto x Lala x Yami. Chapter 1. The Star-Washed Fox of Konoha. The steam rising from the oversized bowl of miso chashu ramen was a universe in miniature. Oily nebulae swirled across the surface of the rich pork broth. Flecks of scallion glittered like distant green stars, and the perfectly sliced pork swam like celestial continents in the savory cosmos. For Naruto Uzumaki, this was the most comforting universe he knew. It was tangible, warm, and blessedly simple. Here, in the humid, welcoming confines of Ichiraku ramen, surrounded by the clatter of chopsticks and the gruff, fond greetings of Chuki and Ayame. He was not the sole survivor of a stellar genocide. He was just Naruto, Konoha's #1 hyperactive, knucklehead ninja, and the mask fit as comfortably as his own skin. You're going to turn into a Narutomaki yourself if you keep inhaling it like that, Sakura Haruno observed, her voice a familiar blend of exasperation and affection. She nudged her own half-eaten bowl of shio ramen with a delicate touch. A stark contrast to the whirlwind of gastronomic destruction happening to her left. Naruto paused mid-slurp, a noodle dangling precariously from the corner of his mouth. He flashed a grin so wide it seemed to strain the whisker-like marks on his cheeks. What can I say, Sakura-chan? It's the fuel of a future Hokage. Believe it. He punctuated the statement with a draw, modish point of his chopsticks before sucking the errant noodle in with a triumphant zip. Across the worn wooden counter, Sasuke Uchiha grunted, a sound that could have meant anything from derisive agreement to complete indifference. His onyx eyes were fixed on the dark grain of the wood, his own bowl of plain cold soba untouched. He was a statue of coiled potential, a study in brooding silence. Naruto had long ago learned to treat as just another part of the landscape, like a particularly moody mountain. Their sensei, Kakashi Hatake, hadn't even bothered with a bowl. He leaned against the stall's support pillar, one hand in his pocket, the other holding his ubiquitous, orange-covered Ika book. His single visible eye crinkled in amusement. Now, Sakura. Let him enjoy it. Yout. H is as fleeting as a well-timed substitution jutsu. And besides, he added, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, I believe Lord Third is considering adding ramen consumption to the promotion criteria for Jonin. Naruto's a shoe-in. For real. Naruto's blue eyes went wide, sparkling with a naivete so pure it was an art form. It was a carefully cultivated art, honed over a decade of observation and mimicry. He had learned early on that humans, particularly the people of this village, were reassured by predictability. They wanted their heroes flawed, their geniuses aloof, and their orphans loud and attention-seeking. It made them easier to categorize, easier to dismiss, and therefore, easier to hide amongst. Sakura rolled her eyes, but a smile played on her lips. He's kidding, Naruto. You can't eat your way to becoming the village leader. Ah, man. Naruto deflated with theatrical disappointment, slumping over the counter before immediately perking up again. Well, my treat anyway. Another miso chashu, old man Chuki, and whatever these guys want. Chuki, his face a roadmap of laugh lines etched by years of steam and good humor, chuckled. You'll go broke feeding this lot, kid. Especially with Kakashi-san eyeing Ayame's special sake menu. The easy banter was a symphony, and Naruto was its conductor, waving his chopsticks like a baton. He loved this symphony. It was the antithesis of the silence he was born into, the silent, cold void between stars where his escape pod had drifted. It was the opposite of the crushing silence of his true home, a place no one in Konoha had ever seen. This noise, this warmth, this simple, grounding reality, it was the anchor that kept him from drifting away. Just as Chuki placed another steaming bowl before him, a new set of figures approached the ramen stand. The scent of roasted pork was momentarily tinged with the smell of medicinal herbs and the faint, earthy musk of a canine companion. Team 8, Kiba Inuzuka swaggered to a stop. His Ninken partner Akamaru perched on his head, yipping a soft greeting. Well, if it isn't Team 7, hogging the best seats as usual. Saving some for the rest of us, Dobi. There's always room for you, Kiba. Naruto shot back with a grin, even if your dog has better manners. Akamaru yipped again, this time indignantly. Shino Aburame adjusted his dark glasses, the high collar of his coat obscuring his mouth. His point is logical. This establishment is popular. Occupying prime seating for an extended duration can be considered inefficient for the proprietor. Their sensei, Kurenai Yuhi, offered a graceful smile. Don't mind them. We were just on our way back from a training exercise. Her eyes, a striking shade of red, swept over the group with a warm intelligence. But it was the final member of her team who caught Naruto's attention, not because she spoke, but precisely because she didn't. Hinata Hyuga stood slightly behind Kurenai, her hands clasped nervously before her. Her gaze was fixed on the ground, her pale lavender eyes hidden beneath her dark blue bangs. She was a whisper in a world of shouts, and Naruto had always felt a strange, protective kinship with her for it. "Hey, Hinata," he called out, his voice softer than it had been a moment ago. Her head snapped up, a faint blush dusting her cheeks. Naruto-kun," she stammered, fiddling with the hem of her oversized jacket. "Pull up a stool, I'm buying." He gestured to the empty seat next to him. Kiba snorted. "Yeah, right, we've got a report to the Hokage. Come on, Hinata." He started to turn, but Kurenai placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "A short break won't hurt," the Jonin said, her gaze lingering on Hinata's flustered expression. She looked at her student with a knowing softness. Sometimes the best training is learning to relax. "Go on, Hinata." Hinata looked as if she'd been asked to wrestle a bear. She took a tentative step forward, her movements shy and uncertain. As she sat, Kurenai leaned in slightly. "Remember what we were practicing," she murmured, just loud enough for Naruto's enhanced hearing to catch. "Observation. Focus. See beyond the surface." It was a simple instruction, a common training mantra for a Hyuga. But as Hinata settled onto the stool, she took the words to heart. She wanted to impress Naruto, to show him she wasn't just the stammering, weak girl who always seemed to faint in his presence. She would be a confident ninja. She would observe. Taking a quiet, centering breath, she activated her clan's prized dojutsu. Byakugan. The world shifted. Veins bulged around her temples as the familiar 360-degree field of vision snapped into place. The chakra networks of everyone around her bloomed into view, intricate rivers of blue energy flowing through their bodies. She saw the calm, steady network of Kurenai, the spiky, energetic flow of Kiba, the unsettling, constant hum of the thousands of Kikaichu beetles inside Shino. Kakashi's was a deep, powerful river, partially obscured by whatever secrets he kept. Sakura's was bright and meticulously controlled, a testament to her talent. Sasuke's was a dark, churning tempest of indigo and violet, cold and angry. And then, she looked at Naruto. And the universe broke. There was no blue river. There was no chakra network. Where a person's soul fire should have been, there was everything. It wasn't a void, it was the opposite of a void. It was a maelstrom of light, a silent, swirling galaxy captured in the form of a boy. She saw the incandescent fury of a billion suns being born, the cold, diamond-sharp glitter of dying stars. And the soft, ethereal glow of cosmic dust coalescing into new worlds. It was a color she had no name for, a torrent of golden energy so dense and so powerful that it didn't just outshine the other chakra networks, it rendered them utterly insignificant, like candles trying to illuminate a supernova. There were no tenketsu, no pathways for the energy to follow. The light was the path. It was his skin, his bones, his blood. It pulsed with the slow, rhythmic heartbeat of creation itself. A silent symphony of impossible power, a star nursery where a human soul should be. The sensory input was overwhelming. It bypassed her eyes and slammed directly into her brain. The sheer scale of it was like trying to comprehend infinity in a single glance. Her vision swam, the Amen stand dissolving into a smear of incoherent light. A sharp, stabbing pain erupted behind her eyes. A trickle of blood, warm and metallic, dripped from her nose. Hinata. Kurenai's voice was a distant echo. The world tilted violently. The last thing she saw before her consciousness fractured was a flicker of concern in that roaring, golden cosmos, a single, focused star turning its attention directly on her. She crumpled sideways, her mind mercifully shutting down to protect itself from the sheer impossibility of what it had witnessed. The walk home was a study in controlled transition. Naruto had deftly handled the aftermath of Hinata's collapse, reassuring a frantic Kurenai that it was probably just exhaustion from training. He had paid the bill, bid his goodbyes with his signature boisterousness, and melted into the evening crowds of Konoha. But as the cheerful lanterns of the main thoroughfare gave way to the dimmer, quieter residential streets, the mask began to dissolve. The broad, easy grin softened, then faded entirely. The slight slouch in his shoulders straightened, his posture aligning with a grace and economy of motion that was anything but clumsy. His blue eyes, which so often seemed wide with simple-minded cheer, became sharp, analytical, sweeping across the rooftops and alleyways, cataloging every shadow, every stray cat, every rustle of leaves in the wind. The air grew cooler, carrying the scent of damp earth and the promise of night. The sounds of the village, the distant laughter, the closing of shop shutters, the murmur of late-night conversations, became data points. Fed into a consciousness far older than his physical form suggested. He turned into a narrow, overlooked side street, his footsteps making no sound on the packed dirt. He stopped before the most derelict building on the block. His apartment. The paint was peeling in sun-bleached strips, the door sagged on its hinges, and a window on the second floor was cracked in a spiderweb pattern. It screamed neglect and poverty. A perfect piece of camouflage. No one would ever suspect anything of value lay within. He pushed the creaking door open, stepping into a small, dusty Genkan. The air inside was stale, thick with the smell of old wood and unwashed laundry. He slipped off his sandals, his movements fluid and precise. The interior was just as pitiful as the exterior, a lumpy futon, a low table with instant ramen cups, a few tattered ninja scrolls on a shelf. A masterpiece of misdirection. He ignored it all, walking directly to the far wall of the single room. It was stained with what looked like old water damage, a large, ugly brown patch marring the faded wallpaper. To a casual observer, it was just another sign of decay. To Naruto, it was the lock. He didn't perform a hand seal. Jutsu were a crude, if effective, application of internal energy. What he did was far more fundamental. He lifted his right hand, his fingers glowing with a soft, internal golden light. He touched 5 specific points on the wall, disguised as the darkest spots in the water stain. He touched them not in a sequence of space, but in a sequence of time and resonance, each touch lasting for a precise number of milliseconds, emitting a specific, sub-audible frequency. It was a key made of physics, not metal. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the air in front of the wall began to shimmer, like heat haze on a summer road. The ugly wallpaper, the stained plaster, the very concept of a physical barrier, dissolved. It didn't slide away or open like a door. It simply ceased to be, revealing a void of perfect, non-reflective blackness. Naruto stepped through the threshold, and the world changed. The stale air was replaced by the clean, sterile scent of ionized particles and recycled oxygen. The silence was absolute, a profound quiet that absorbed all sound. He was standing on a circular platform of polished, obsidian-like material that seemed to float in the center of an enormous sphere. The walls of the sphere were not walls at all, but a seamless, 360-degree holographic display of the local star cluster. This was the observatory, his true home. Nebulae, in vibrant hues of magenta and cyan, drifted lazily in the perceived distance. Stars of every classification burned with silent intensity. Thin, golden lines of light crisscrossed the void, indicating established hyperspace routes, while shimmering fields of pale blue denoted sensor grids and threat detection zones. This was not a simulation. It was a real-time, multi-spectrum feed of the space surrounding Earth's solar system, filtered through technology that was millennia beyond anything this planet had conceived. He walked to the center of the platform. A gesture of his hand caused a constellation of holographic consoles to blossom into existence around him, bathing him in a soft, golden light. Data streams scrolled past, written in the elegant, flowing script of the Uzu celestial architects. A language that was as much mathematics as it was poetry. He spent a few moments reviewing the standard readouts: stellar flare activity, gravitational fluctuations, calm chatter on the encrypted galactic bands. All was quiet. Earth slept on, blissfully unaware of the vast, populated cosmos just beyond its fragile atmosphere. His thoughts drifted back to Hinata. Her reaction had been unexpected. The Byakugan was a fascinating piece of biological sensory equipment. It was designed to perceive the flow of chakra, the unique biological energy of this planet's lifeforms. He was not a lifeform of this planet. He had no chakra. What he had was the Star Forge, the birthright of his people, the ability to touch and command the primordial energies of creation. To the Byakugan, it must have been like looking at the sun. He made a mental note to moderate his energy signature's passive radiation when she was near. He felt a pang of guilt for the pain he'd caused her, however inadvertently. It was a complication, and his life was already complicated enough. It was then that a new symbol blinked into existence on the main console. It was a soft, amber icon, a gentle alert, but to Naruto, it screamed louder than any siren. Unsanctioned FTL deceleration. Vector. SOL3. Origin. Unknown. His posture, already perfect, became rigid. His eyes narrowed, scanning the incoming data with terrifying speed. A ship, small, likely a personal vessel. It had dropped out of hyperspace just beyond the orbit of Saturn, its trajectory decaying rapidly. It was damaged, badly. Its energy signature was Devilicaon, ostentatious, powerful, and notoriously unreliable. He brought up a projection of the vessel. A bright pink, rabbit-themed spaceship, trailing plasma and shedding hull plates. He ran a diagnostic. Life support failing. Propulsion critical. Guidance offline. Its trajectory was no longer just decaying, it was a ballistic entry into Earth's atmosphere. And its projected impact zone was a foe. Rested region just 20 kilometers outside the walls of Konohagakure no Sato. Naruto's jaw tightened. 1,000 calculations raced through his mind. Impact energy release. Seismic repercussions. Potential witnesses. The risk of technological contamination. The absolute imperative of upholding the Galactic Concord's uncontacted Protectorate Treaty, the very treaty that made this world his perfect sanctuary. There was no choice. This could not be allowed to happen. He swiped a hand through the air, and the consoles dissolved back into the void. He strode to the edge of the platform, his standa. Rode orange jumpsuit and blue ninja gear dissolving in a cascade of golden light, replaced instantly by a different uniform. It was a form-fitting suit of matte black material that drank the light, with muted gray plates of hardened armor over his torso, forearms, and shins. An Anbu-style mask, completely blank and featureless save for two dark eye slits, materialized over his face. The suit was a construct of the Star Forge, a weave of hardened light and kinetic dampening fields that could withstand the vacuum of space or the heart of a volcano. He closed his eyes, extending his senses beyond the observatory. He pinpointed the falling ship, a screaming meteor of pink and orange against the dark canvas of the night sky. He fixed its coordinates, and his own, in his mind. Then, he reached into the core of his being, to the swirling galaxy Hinata had seen, and took hold of a sun. Stellar translocation. His body dissolved. For a fraction of a nanosecond, the space where he stood was filled with a column of pure, blinding golden light, a miniature star burning in the heart of the hidden dimension. Then, it was gone. The forest floor was a tapestry of damp leaves and tangled roots, slick with evening dew under the pale light of a crescent moon. The air was filled with the chirping of crickets and the rustle of unseen things in the undergrowth. And then, a new star was born between the ancient trees. A pillar of gold light erupted without sound, searing the darkness for an instant before collapsing in on itself, leaving Naruto standing in the center of a small clearing. The air around him crackled with residual energy. The smell of ozone sharp and clean. He looked up, his masked face tilted towards the heavens. He could see it now with his own eyes, a man-made shooting star growing larger by the second. It was entering the upper atmosphere, heat shielding glowing a furious cherry red. He had mere moments. He held out his hands, palms facing the sky. A soft, golden light emanated from them, growing in intensity. He wasn't weaving signs or molding chakra. He was imposing his will upon the very fabric of reality. He reached out with his power, weaving a net of pure energy in the upper atmosphere. A cradle of light miles wide. It had to be strong enough to absorb the kinetic energy of a multi-ton vessel traveling at hypersonic speeds, yet gentle enough not to simply vaporize it on contact. It was like catching a cannonball with a spider's web. The ship hit the energy field. There was no thunderous boom, no cataclysmic explosion. Instead, a silent, breathtaking aurora borealis bloomed across the night sky. Ribbons of green, violet, and gold light danced and shimmered as the cradle absorbed and redistributed the vessel's momentum, transforming a force of utter destruction into a harmless, beautiful light show. The ship, its deadly velocity bled away, now fell like a stone. Naruto refined his control, creating a focused tractor beam that locked onto the hull. He guided its descent, easing it down through the canopy of the trees. Branches snapped, leaves flew, but the landing was surprisingly gentle. The pink, rabbit-themed ship settled into a clearing with a final groaning shudder of stressed metal, steam hissing from ruptured conduits. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the drip of coolant onto the forest floor. The uncontacted protectorate was, for the moment, secure. No cataclysm, no crater, just a strangely parked spaceship. He approached the vessel, his steps silent. The main entry hatch had been fused shut by the heat of re-entry. With a flick of his wrist, a blade of pure, golden light, no thicker than a sheet of paper but with an edge that could slice atoms, extended from his gauntlet. He carved a perfect circle around the hatch with effortless precision, the superheated metal parting like water. He pushed the newly made door, and it fell inward with a heavy clang. The interior of the ship was chaos. Sparks rained down from shattered consoles, and the air was thick with the acrid smell of burnt electronics. In the center of the cockpit, slumped in the pilot's chair, was a figure. She was young, with startlingly long, pink hair that cascaded over the chair. She wore a strange, metallic outfit that seemed both futuristic and oddly revealing. As he stepped inside, she stirred, a low groan escaping her lips. Her eyes fluttered open. They were a stunning shade of emerald green, currently wide with disorientation and fear. Her gaze locked onto his masked face, a dark silhouette against the newly carved opening. This was the source of the anomaly. The complication. Before he could speak, before he could assess the situation further, another sound pierced the night. It was a low, powerful hum, the sound of a different kind of engine descending from the sky. Naruto turned, his body instantly shifting into a defensive posture, shielding the girl in the cockpit from view. A second ship lowered itself into the crash site. This one was the antithesis of the first. Where the pink ship was whimsical and curved, this vessel was all sharp angles and garish, ostentatious gold plating. It bristled with unnecessary fins and weapon emplacements. A declaration of wealth and aggression. The insignia of a minor noble house from the Gid Lucion Develuk system was emblazoned on its side. A suitor. One of the political jackals Lala Satellan Develuk was infamous for fleeing. A transport beam, a column of shimmering purple light, deposited a figure onto the forest floor. He was tall and reptilian, clad in an ornate suit of powered armor that was clearly meant more for ceremony than for actual combat. This was Count Brox, a being whose arrogance was matched only by his lack of self-awareness. Princess Lala, the Count boomed, his voice amplified by his helmet's external speakers. Your little tantrum is over. Your father, the king, will be hearing of my heroic rescue. Now, step away from my betrothed, you primitive. The last command was directed at Naruto. Brox raised a gauntlet, a weapon port glowing with ominous red light. Naruto remained perfectly still. He analyzed the Count's armor, his weapon's energy signature, his posture, his choice of words. It took him less than a second to formulate a dozen different ways to end the confrontation. The goal was not destruction, but de-escalation with maximum efficiency and minimum collateral damage. And, if possible, to maintain the illusion that he was nothing more than what the Count saw, a native of this backwater world. He let out a short, dismissive breath. A puff of condensation in the cool night air. She's not going anywhere with you. His voice was electronically filtered by the mask, giving it a flat, metallic tone devoid of emotion. The Count laughed, a grating, ugly sound. Bold words for a creature still playing with fire and sharpened stones. You dare defy a Count of the Broxian dynasty. I will atomize you in this entire forest. The gauntlet weapon whined, the red light intensifying. Behold the power of a planet-buster cannon. A thick beam of crimson energy erupted from the Count's gauntlet, screaming through the air, aimed directly at Naruto's chest. It was a powerful attack, certainly capable of leveling a city block. Calling it a planet-buster, however, was laughably arrogant. Naruto didn't move, he didn't flinch, he simply raised his left hand. For the benefit of his audience of two, one terrified princess and one pompous fool, he weaved a single, complex hand seal that he had invented on the spot, one that meant absolutely nothing. As his fingers locked into place, a translucent shield of shimmering gold sprang into existence before him. It was a complex mosaic of interlocking hexagons, a perfect geometric defense. The crimson beam slammed into the shield and vanished. There was no explosion, no impact, no sound. The energy was simply absorbed, swallowed whole by the Star-Forge construct, which didn't even flicker. The trees behind Naruto didn't so much as shed a leaf. Count Brox's laughter died in his throat. His reptilian eyes widened in disbelief. What sorcery is this? From the crashed ship, Lala watched. Her fear momentarily replaced by utter astonishment. No primitive life form should possess that kind of defensive technology. It was more advanced than her own father's royal guard shields. Naruto lowered his hand, the hexagonal shield dissolving into motes of fading light. My turn. The words were flat, emotionless. And then he was gone. He didn't use a flicker jutsu or a body replacement. He used stellar translocation. He ceased to exist in front of the Count and began to exist behind him in the same instant. Before Brox could even process that the target was no longer in front of him, Naruto was already in motion. His movements were a blur of black, an exercise in brutal, surgical grace. He didn't punch. He didn't kick. He tapped. His fingers, glowing with a focused, internal light, struck 5 key points on the Count's power armor. Tap. The primary power conduit on the back. Tap. The servo motor actuator at the right elbow. Tap. The targeting computer junction at the helmet's base. Tap. The leg gyrostabilizer. Tap. The emergency core vent. Each tap sent a precise pulse of disruptive energy into the suit's systems, shorting them out with surgical precision. It was like a virus delivered through physical contact. The armor's lights flickered and died. The hum of its power core choked and went silent. The formidable suit of armor seized up, freezing solid and then collapsing under its own weight with a groan of metal, trapping the Count inside like a turtle in a very expensive, non-functional shell. The entire takedown had taken less than a second. Naruto stood over the heap of inert metal, his blank mask looking down at the imprisoned noble. He hadn't caused the Count any physical harm, but he had utterly and completely neutralized him. It was a demonstration of overwhelming, elegant power, a message delivered with terrifying clarity. He turned his head, his featureless mask now facing the crashed ship. He saw the girl with the pink hair, Princess Lala, staring at him. Her emerald eyes filled with a mixture of awe, fear, and something else, something he hadn't seen directed at him in a very long time. Genuine, unadulterated curiosity. He walked back towards her, the silence of the forest once again asserting itself. He stopped at the opening he had carved, the moonlight glinting off his dark uniform. Your presence here has just endangered this entire planet, he said, his filtered voice calm and even. Welcome to Earth. He reached out a hand, not to harm, but to help. An offer of sanctuary from the strange, masked native W. Ho had just defeated a galactic noble with impossible power. For Lala, who had run away seeking freedom and adventure, it seemed she had crashed directly into its epicenter. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The logic of a living weapon. The silence that followed the subjugation of Count Brox was a physical entity. It pressed in on the small clearing, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the faint, rhythmic dripping of hot fluid from Lala's wounded starship and the almost inaudible hum of Naruto's inactive combat suit. The moon, a sharp silver sickle in the indigo sky, cast long, distorted shadows through the ancient trees, turning the forest into a place of secrets and stark contrasts. Lala Satellin Deviluk, first princess of the most powerful empire in the known galaxy, sat frozen in the pilot's seat of her ruined vessel. Her mind a frantic cascade of impossibilities. Primitives did not move like that. Primitives did not wield defensive energy fields that could nonchalantly swallow a particle beam. Primitives did not disable advanced power armor with a series of taps that seemed to whisper through the metal rather than strike it. The being standing before her, clad in seamless black and hidden behind a featureless mask, was an anomaly of galactic proportions. Her father, Gid Lucion Deviluk, commanded fleets that could sterilize star systems, Yet the casual, almost bored efficiency of this creature's power felt different. More fundamental. It was like comparing a meticulously crafted explosion to the silent, inexorable force of gravity. Naruto's offered hand remained extended, steady and patient. It was a simple gesture, yet in the context of the preceding 60 seconds, it was the most baffling thing of all. He had not gloated. He had not threatened. He had simply solved the problem. Your continued presence in a non-functional vehicle is suboptimal, the filtered voice stated, breaking the stillness. The energy release from your damaged power core, while minor, is batting this region in particles that are foreign to this planet's biosphere. Furthermore, that imbecile's ship, he gestured with his head towards the gaudy golden vessel, is broadcasting a low-level D.I. stress signal on a standard Concord frequency. More will come. Lala's mind, the mind of a super-genius inventor, finally kicked back into gear, overriding her fear with a surge of analytical curiosity. He was right. On all points. Her ship's core was leaking chronon particles, and while her peak bot could normally recalibrate it, the main systems were fried. The logic was sound. The situation was untenable. She finally took his offered hand. The glove of his suit was not cold metal, nor was it soft fabric. It felt like compressed energy, smooth and strangely vital, with a faint, almost imperceptible vibration humming through it. He pulled her to her feet with a strength that felt entirely effortless, guiding her out of the cockpit she had called home for the past week of her frantic escape. Stepping onto the damp earth, she got a better sense of his scale. He was taller than he had seemed in the village, his posture radiating a quiet, unshakable confidence that made him feel larger than his physical frame. What are you? Lala asked, her voice barely a whisper. The question was not just for him, but for the universe itself. A complication for your pursuers, Naruto replied, his mask turning back towards the inert form of Count Brox. He raised his hand, and a thin, golden thread of light lashed out, wrapping around the gaudy ship. With a smooth pull, the ship was lifted from the ground and gently set down beside Lala's wrecked vessel. And the one who was currently cleaning up your mess. He then walked over to Brox's ship, placing his palm flat against the hull. A soft golden light suffused the vessel, and the distress signal abruptly cut out. He had not smashed the console, he had rewritten its energy flow at a quantum level, telling it to be silent. Lala watched, her emerald eyes wide. My inventions are usually much more reliable, she mumbled, a defensive pout forming on her lips. I was experimenting with a new probability-based inertial dampener. The calculations were complex. Probability-based drives are inherently unstable without a corresponding reality anchor, the masked figure said, his head tilted slightly as he examined the scorch marks on her pink ship. You were creating localized paradoxes every time you jumped, bleeding kinetic potential into the drive itself instead of the surrounding space-time. A cascade failure was inevitable. Lala's jaw dropped. He wasn't just powerful, he understood the theory. He had diagnosed a flaw in her most advanced, secret prototype with a single glance. No one, not even her father's chief engineers, had grasped the principles she was working with. How could you possibly know that? I am observant, he stated, the simple words carrying an impossible weight. He turned his blank face back to her. We need to leave. This location is compromised. We will relocate to a place of my choosing. It is isolated and shielded from most forms of remote sensing. You will be safe there, for now. A place. Where? He didn't answer immediately. He looked up at the moon, then at the surrounding forest, as if taking a final survey of the scene. The featureless mask seemed to absorb the pale light, giving nothing away. A graveyard, he said finally, his voice losing its electronic filter for a moment, revealing a deeper, more somber tone. The ghosts there are my own. They won't mind the company. Without further explanation, he scooped her into his arms. The movement was so swift and unexpected that she let out a small squeak of surprise. Before she could protest, he spoke a single word. A word that was not a language she knew but a command that the universe itself seemed to obey. Translocate. The world dissolved. There was no sensation of movement, no rushing wind or blurring scenery. One instant, they were standing in a moonlit forest clearing in the land of fire, the smell of burnt metal and ozone in the air. The next, they were standing on a cliff of black, wave-polished stone. the air thick with the taste of salt and the roar of an angry sea. The moon was the same, but the world around them had been utterly rewritten. Below them, a tempestuous ocean crashed against the base of the cliffs, sending plumes of white spray high into the air. Before them, sprawled across a desolate peninsula, lay the ruins of a city. Ancient stone walls, thick enough to repel an army, were crumbled and broken, covered in a thick carpet of dark green moss. Skeletal remains of tall, spiraling towers clawed at the night sky, their forms suggesting an elegance and architectural mastery that defied the simple, functional designs of Konoha. The entire city was built in a swirling, concentric pattern, like a fossilized hurricane. A massive, broken whirlpool carved into the very stone at its center. This was Uzushiogakure, the ancestral home of the Uzumaki clan. A place destroyed decades ago, a name spoken only in whispers in the ninja world. For Naruto, it was the perfect cover story. A lie built around a deeper, more profound truth. He gently set Lala down on the precipice, the wind whipping her long pink hair around her face. She stumbled, her senses reeling from the instantaneous journey. She looked back the way they had come. There was only churning ocean. No continent, no forest. They had traveled hundreds of kilometers in the blink of an eye. Teleportation. She breathed, her mind racing to categorize the technology. That wasn't a jump drive. There was no dimensional shear. It was a direct particle reassignment. The energy cost must be astronomical. Naruto's masked gaze swept over the ruins. A profound sadness emanated from him, a palpable aura of loss that transcended the electronic filter of his suit. This was my people's home, he said, the lie and the truth intertwined. The Uzumaki clan of Earth, his supposed ancestors. The Uzu celestial architects of a distant star system, his true kin. Both were gone, their homes turned to dust and memory. The emotion was genuine, even if its context was a carefully constructed deception. They were masters of fuinjutsu, he continued, using the local terminology for sealing techniques. They created barriers that could hide a city from the world. Some of those barriers, the foundational ones, still function. They will mask your energy signature from any pursuers who come looking. He led her down a winding, treacherous path carved into the cliff face. The stones were slick with sea spray, but he moved with the surety of someone who had walked this path 1,000 times, in memory if not in person. They passed through the shattered main gate, the immense stone doors lying in pieces like fallen gods. Inside, the silence was different from the forest. It was older, deeper, weighted with history and tragedy. The wind howled through the empty streets and broken buildings, sounding like a mournful chorus. Lala, for all her bubbly confidence, felt a shiver of awe and sorrow. This place felt sacred. What happened here? She asked softly. They were too powerful, Naruto said, his voice a low murmur beneath the wind's howl. Their art was coveted, and their strength was feared. The other nations of this world, my own home village included, allied against them. They destroyed this city to possess its secrets, and in their greed, they lost them forever. Another lie woven around another truth. The nations of this world had feared the Uzumaki. The empires of the galaxy had feared Uzu. The Zetsubo Imperium had not come to steal, however. They had come to consume. He led her towards the center of the ruined city, to the base of the largest, most intact tower. With a gesture, a section of what looked like solid, vine-choked wall shimmered and became translucent, revealing a dark opening. An old Uzumaki stasis field, one he had found and reactivated on a previous visit, repurposing it with his own technology. Inside, he commanded gently. The interior was a stark contrast to the ruin outside. It was a single, vast cylindrical chamber, spotlessly clean and lit by a soft, golden glow emanating from glowing patterns on the walls, patterns that mirrored the star charts in his observatory. In the center of the room sat an object that made Lala gasp. It was her escape pod, the one from her ship. Not a replica, the very same one, with the same scorch marks and dented fins. But how? While you were unconscious during the translocation, I routed a portion of the energy to a secondary destination. I retrieved your pod and your personal effects, he explained. He had, in fact, performed 2 near-simultaneous translocations, one for them, and a micro-translocation for the pod itself. The energy expenditure was trivial to him, but he knew it would be considered impossible by galactic standards. Your flight recorder and your communication suite are damaged beyond simple repair, but the core systems are salvageable. He tapped the side of his mask, and the featureless faceplate retracted with a faint hiss, dissolving into his suit and revealing the face of Naruto Uzumaki. The whiskered cheeks, the bright blue eyes, the spiky blonde hair. It was the face of the goofy ninja from the ramen stand. But the expression it wore was entirely different. The eyes were ancient, filled with a sharp, piercing intelligence and a deep, weary sorrow. The familiar grin was absent, replaced by a grim set to his mouth. Lala stared, her brain trying to reconcile the two images, the knucklehead ninja and the cosmic powerhouse. They were the same person. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. "You're the boy from the village. That is the role I play," he confirmed, walking over to her pod. He ran a hand over its surface, and a holographic display of its internal schematics bloomed in the air beside it. Data scrolled past, a mixture of Devilicaon engineering symbols and his own, more elegant Uzu script. "A mask, much like the one you wear. Runaway princess, is a role, is it not? A way to escape the cage of being Lala Satalin Deviluk." His perception was unsettling. He saw through her desire for freedom and adventure to the desperation and loneliness that fueled it. "I need to understand what they are," he said, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface, manipulating the schematics with blinding speed. "Your pursuers, the ones who hired that assassin." Assassin. Lala's blood ran cold. She had assumed her suitor had tracked her himself. What assassin? Before Naruto could answer, an alarm blared through the chamber. It wasn't loud, but it was insistent. A piercing chime that cut through the air. On the far wall, a section of the glowing Uzu patterns shifted, forming a tactical map of the peninsula. A single, blinking red dot had appeared at the outermost edge of the island. Intruder. Lifeform signature. Unknown. Energy profile. High yield, metamorphic. Naruto's head snapped up. His blue eyes, which had been focused on the schematics, became as hard and cold as chips of ice. "It seems my welcome is not as warm as I had hoped." He had been so focused on Lala's arrival, on Brock's, on setting up this sanctuary, that he had overlooked another possibility. He had analyzed the energy of the fight with Brock's, but he hadn't considered that someone else might be able to do the same. Someone far more competent than the buffoonish count. "Stay here," he commanded Lala, his voice leaving no room for argument. "This chamber is shielded. Do not leave under any circumstances." The blank mask flowed back up over his face, hiding his grim expression. The problem solver was back. "It appears our conversation about assassins will have to wait. It seems one has just arrived." He strode towards the shimmering doorway, his posture once again that of a warrior. Lala watched him go, a torrent of questions and a new, terrifying fear swirling within her. She had fled a gilded cage only to land in the middle of a secret war, protected by a boy who was not a boy. A ninja who was not a ninja, a lonely ghost haunting the ruins of his people. And now, something else was coming for her, drawn by the echoes of her disastrous flight. Golden darkness moved through the ruins like a whisper. Her feet, clad in simple black boots, made no sound on the broken stones. Her entire being was a study in lethal efficiency. Her dark, Gothic-style dress did not hinder her movements. It flowed around her like a part of the shadows she occupied. Her long, blonde hair, the color of spun gold, was a stark contrast to her somber attire and the grim determination in her crimson eyes. Her name, her designation, was Golden Darkness. She was a weapon, biologically engineered and forged for a single purpose, to be the most effective assassin in the galaxy. Her current contract, accepted from the ridiculously ostentatious Count Zastan of Deviluk, was simple: locate and retrieve the runaway princess, Lala Satalin Deviluk. The contract was secondary, however, over primary operational directive: self-improvement through combat and data acquisition. Her advanced sensors had picked up the energy signature from Lala's crash and the subsequent confrontation from halfway across the solar system. The initial deceleration burn was pure Devilicaon tech, sloppy and powerful. But the second event, that was something else. A massive, kinetic energy absorption event followed by a pinpoint, non-lethal systems takedown and 2 instantaneous, residue-free translocation events. The signature was clean, efficient, and utterly alien. It did not match any known technology in the galactic database. It was fascinating. Logic dictated that this unknown power was now protecting the target. Therefore, to complete her contract, she must confront and neutralize this power. This was not a chore. It was an opportunity, a chance to test her abilities against something new. She stood on a high, crumbling wall overlooking the central plaza, her crimson eyes scanning the area. The air tasted of salt and sorrow. This place was a tomb. Her auditory sensors picked up the faint, rhythmic crash of waves, the howl of the wind, and something else. The hum of a high-frequency energy field. A barrier. It emanated from the base of the central tower. The target was inside. She prepared to move, to phase through the stone and bypass the barrier directly. It was the most logical course of action. I wouldn't do that if I were you. The voice came from directly behind her. It was filtered, metallic, and perfectly calm. Yami's reaction was instantaneous. She did not jump or flinch. Her body simply exploded into motion. She spun, not on her feet, but in the air, her entire form dissolving into a whirlwind of razor-sharp golden hair, every strand harder than diamond. As a 360-degree attack meant to shred anything within a 5-meter radius. It meant nothing. The masked figure was no longer there. He stood 20 meters away, atop the arch of a broken gateway, his axe suit a stark silhouette against the moon. He hadn't moved with speed, he had simply ceased to be in one place and started to be in another. Translocation, Yami stated, her voice flat and analytical. Her hair retracted, reforming into its original shape. She cataloged the ability. Instantaneous. No energy signature she could detect. A formidable defensive and repositioning tool. You were the anomaly from the forest. And you were the contract killer, Naruto replied, his tone conversational. Your energy signature is unique. A biological weapon, self-sustaining. Your ability to morph your cellular structure into hardened weapons is impressive. The energy required to maintain the integrity of the molecular bonds must be significant. Yami tilted her head. He wasn't boasting or threatening. He was analyzing her, as if she were a piece of technology to be understood. It was new. Most opponents just screamed and shot at her. My purpose is to retrieve the target, Lala Saddle and Deviluk. My analysis indicates you are an obstacle, she said, her crimson eyes glowing faintly. The logical course of action is to eliminate the obstacle. A flawed premise, Naruto countered, his masked face unreadable. You assume your purpose is defined by your current contract. An external variable, a temporary state. True purpose is internal. The conversation was irritatingly illogical to Yami. Purpose was function. Her function was to complete contracts. Your philosophical ramblings are irrelevant data. Prepare for elimination. This time, she didn't waste energy on an area of effect attack. She targeted him directly. Her right arm dissolved, not into hair, but into a massive, wicked-looking blade of golden metal, the limb elongating as she lunged forward, covering the 20 meters in a fraction of a second. The blade was aimed directly at his neck. Naruto didn't translocate. He stood his ground. At the last possible nanosecond, his own right hand blurred. He didn't form a shield. He formed a blade, a straight, simple sword of pure, golden light extended from his gauntlet. It was not a physical object, but a focused, contained beam of Star Forge energy. Clang. The sound was impossibly sharp, a perfect, high-frequency chime that echoed across the ruins. Yami's bioweapon, capable of shearing through the armored hull of a battleship, had been stopped cold by his sword of light. The point of impact flared, a miniature sun born between them. Yami's eyes widened slightly. She felt the feedback through her arm. His weapon wasn't just blocking hers, it was resonating against it, analyzing its molecular structure. She pushed forward, applying more force. Her blade began to vibrate, to morph, sprouting smaller, sharper barbs to try and get around his defense. Naruto's response was immediate. His own blade of light shimmered, its form flowing like liquid metal. It became a curved saber, parrying her lunge perfectly. Then it became a trident, catching her morphing blade between its prongs. Then it became a fine, needle-pointed rapier, disengaging and aiming for the joint where her arm met her shoulder. This wasn't a brawl, it was a conversation spoken in the language of steel and light. Yami was forced to pull back, her arm reforming. Her internal processors were working furiously. Opponent demonstrates mastery of constructed energy weapons. Forms are fluid, adaptive. Defensive capabilities equal to or greater than my own offensive output. New strategy required. She changed tactics. Her entire body became the weapon. She launched herself at him, her hands becoming claws. Her legs morphing into powerful, bladed appendages. She was a whirlwind of death, each strike precise, each movement calculated to maim or kill. Naruto became a phantom. He never used translocation again. He simply moved. His footwork was a form of art, each step, each pivot, each duck and weave placing him exactly where her attacks were not. He didn't just dodge, he flowed around her, using her own momentum against her. His star-forged constructs were no longer just blades. A small, circular shield would appear on his forearm to deflect a claw, then dissolve. A thin rod would spring from his boot to trip a leg sweep. Then vanish. He was creating and uncreating his tools on the fly, a perfect, seamless fusion of defense and offense that used the absolute minimum energy required for each action. He wasn't fighting her, he was dancing with her. And he was leading. Your style is predictable, his filtered voice cut through the sounds of their battle. You rely on overwhelming force and rapid transformation. You don't account for energy conservation. Your transformations have 8.02-second lag as your cells receive their new instructions. You are powerful, you are not efficient. He was getting inside her head. He was narrating her weaknesses to her as she was demonstrating them. It was infuriating. It was also educational. She disengaged, leaping back to the top of a ruined wall. Putting distance between them, she needed to reassess. Brute force was failing. Cunning was required. You analyze, she stated, her breath coming in slight pants. Her energy reserves were still high, but the constant morphing was more taxing than a standard fight. I do more than analyze, Naruto replied, standing perfectly still in the center of the plaza, his sword of light having dissolved back into nothing. I understand. And then he attacked. He didn't charge. He raised a hand, and the very ground beneath Yami's feet erupted. Spikes of golden light, identical to his sword, shot up from the ancient stone. Not to impale her, but to force her into the air. She leapt, her feet morphing into small jets to grant her flight. As she rose, the air around her solidified. A cage, a perfect, 20-meter sphere of interlocking golden hexagons, the same pattern as the shield he'd used against Brox, sprang into existence around her, trapping her in midair. She struck the wall of the cage. Her hand, now a massive hammer, slammed against the translucent gold barrier. A deep gong sound echoed, and the entire cage flared with light, but it held firm. She struck it again and again, her frustration mounting. The barrier was absorbing and redistributing the kinetic force of her blows across its entire surface. It was a perfect design. She was trapped, defeated. She stopped her assault, hovering in the center of the golden sphere, her fists clenched. She had failed her contract. She had been outmaneuvered, outthought, and captured without a single scratch being laid upon her. The opponent was her superior in every way. Naruto stood below, looking up at her, his masked face giving nothing away. He could have destroyed her. A simple command and the cage could have collapsed inward, crushing her. Or he could have simply left her there to starve. Instead, he spoke. What is your designation? Golden Darkness, she replied, her voice clipped. It was a statement of fact. The masked figure shook his head. No, that is a title, a label given to you by your creators. A name for a tool. It is not who you are. What is your name? Yami stared down at him, confused. The question was illogical. She was Golden Darkness. Designation and identity were one and the same. I do not have one. Everything that thinks, that feels, that wonders, deserves a name, the figure said, his voice softening slightly. In the old tongue of this land, you would be, Yami. Darkness. But you are more than just darkness. You are also that golden light. You are the first of your kind I have encountered. A new beginning, a genesis. He paused, as if considering. I will call you Eve. Eve. The name felt strange on her processors. It was a variable she had no data for. Now, Eve, Naruto continued, you have a choice. I can keep you in this cage until your contract expires and your master recalls you. Or you can nullify the contract yourself and choose your own path. A path that doesn't involve hunting young girls for pompous nobles. The cage shimmered and dissolved into motes of light, leaving her floating in the open air, completely free. He had disarmed her, defeated her, captured her, and then let her go. The logic of the situation had completely collapsed. His actions were a string of non sequiturs. He fought with the skill of a master warrior, spoke with the wisdom of a philosopher, and acted with a mercy that was completely antithetical to the nature of combat. She drifted slowly down to the ground, her feet reforming, her expression one of profound confusion. She landed a few meters from him, her crimson eyes searching his blank mask for an answer that wasn't there. He held out a hand. Not in aggression, not in offering aid, but simply open. A small, white, paper-wrapped object materialized in his palm in a soft shimmer of golden light. "What is that?" she asked. "Taiyaki," he replied. "A local delicacy. It's a cake, shaped like a fish, filled with sweet red bean paste. I find the contrast between the expected form and the actual taste to be interesting." He tossed it to her. She caught it out of sheer reflex. It was warm. "Fulfill your contract, or stay," Naruto said, his voice once again the calm, analytical tone from the beginning. "Find your own purpose. The choice is yours, Eve. This world has more to offer than just fulfilling the orders of others." He turned his back on her, an act of supreme, almost foolish confidence, and began walking back towards the hidden entrance of the tower. He was leaving himself completely vulnerable. He was showing her that he did not consider her a threat. He was showing her trust. Yami, or Eve, stood alone in the moonlit ruins of a dead city, a defeated assassin holding a warm, fish-shaped cake. He looked from the cake to the retreating back of the masked anomaly who had given her a new name and an impossible choice. For the first time in her existence, her programming offered no clear path forward. For the first time, she had to decide for herself. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Gilded Cage and the Seeing Eye. The ceiling of Hinata Hyuga's room was a perfect, unblemished white. It was a canvas of absolute purity, devoid of any crack, stain, or imperfection. Like everything else in the Hyuga main house, its flawlessness was a statement, a testament to the clan's ideal of perfect order, perfect discipline, perfect control. For 18 hours, since her return from the ramen stand, Hinata had stared at that oppressive perfection, and for the first time in her life, she found it to be a profound and suffocating lie. Her mind was a tempest, her inner world irrevocably shattered and remade. The memory of what she had seen with her Byakugan was not a passive recollection, it was an active presence. It had burned itself onto the backs of her eyelids, a psychic imprint that pulsed behind the veil of the mundane world. When she closed her eyes, it was there. Not a blinding light, as she had tried to explain to a concerned Kurenai-sensei, but a vision of such impossible, terrifying beauty that it defied all language. She had seen the birth of suns in a boy's soul. She had witnessed the silent, graceful dance of galaxies where a chakra network should have been. It was the crushing, vibrant, living heart of the cosmos, contained within the vessel of the loudest, most determined, and kindest boy she had ever known. The scale of it was a madness, a truth so vast that her mind had simply collapsed the circuit breaker to keep from being torn apart. Her dojutsu, the pride of her clan, had shown her a god hiding in plain sight, and the only defense her body had was to faint. The physical effects had lingered. A phantom ache throbbed behind her eyes, and the world seemed muted, washed out. A pale imitation of the vibrant reality she now knew existed. The steady, flowing river of her own chakra, which had always felt like a source of quiet strength, now seemed like a tiny, insignificant trickle compared to the roaring celestial ocean she had glimpsed within Naruto Uzumaki. It made her feel small. It made her feel fragile. And yet, it also sparked something else within her. Something dormant and profound. A fierce, protective awe. A polite, almost silent knock echoed on her shoji door. "Hinata-sama." The voice was that of a clan retainer, toneless and respectful. "Hi, Ashi-sama requests your presence in the southern audience chamber." Immediately, a chill, colder than the morning air, traced a path down her spine. The southern audience chamber was not for family matters. It was for official clan business, for pronouncements of judgment, for confrontations. Her father, Hiashi Hyuga, was not a man given to idle curiosity. Her collapse yesterday had not been seen as a medical issue, but as a clan issue. The heiress's Byakugan had failed. It had been overwhelmed. An unacceptable weakness. An anomaly that required investigation and, if necessary, excision. She knew, with a certainty that settled like a stone in her stomach, that this was about Naruto. Her hands trembled as she straightened the lavender trim of her formal robes. The fabric was heavy, the fine silk a cage of tradition. As she slid the door open, the hallway beyond was a study in severe elegance. Polished dark wood floors reflected the pale morning light from the paper screens like a still, black pond. The air was cool and smelled faintly of old wood and incense. Every clan member she passed averted their eyes and bowed their heads, their movements synchronized and silent. It was the respect afforded to the heiress. But it felt like the deference shown to a prisoner on her way to the gallows. She walked the long, silent corridors, her soft-soled tabi making no sound. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, disorderly rhythm in a house dedicated to absolute order. The Byakugan hadn't failed. It had succeeded beyond its wildest design. It had shown her the truth. And she knew, with every fiber of her being, that she could not let her father, in his quest for perfection and control, harm the boy who held the universe inside him. The summons arrived not by a formal messenger hawk or a Chunin courier, but by a single, silent Hyuga clansman who seemed to materialize from the shadows of the alleyway outside Naruto's apartment. He stood with perfect posture, his face an impassive mask, his pale, pupil-less eyes seeming to look through Naruto rather than at him. He didn't speak. He simply held out a small, rolled scroll of pristine white parchment, tied with a simple purple cord. Naruto, still in his sleep attire of a worn orange t-shirt and pajama pants, took the scroll. He didn't need to open it to know its contents. His senses, even when dampened to appear human, felt the cold, oppressive weight of the Hyuga clan's authority radiating from the messenger. It was a summons, not an invitation. "Tell Hiyashi-sama I'll be there," Naruto said, his voice carefully calibrated to its usual cheerful, slightly clueless pitch. "Just gotta find my other sandal. Believe it." He gave the clansman a thumbs up and a blinding grin. The Hyuga's expression didn't flicker. He simply bowed, a stiff, formal gesture, and then turned and walked away, his movements economical and silent. The moment the man rounded the corner, Naruto's grin vanished. His eyes became sharp and cold. He closed his apartment door. The flimsy wood clicking shut, and the entire atmosphere of the room shifted. He walked past the dusty table and the lumpy futon, stepping through the shimmering portal into the observatory. The silent, star-strewn void of his true home was a welcome balm after the rigid formality of the Hyuga. Consoles of golden light bloomed around him, and he instantly called up a file. It was everything the Konoha archives had on the Hyuga clan, cross-referenced with his own private observations. Their history, their techniques, their political structure, their psychological profiles. Hiyashi Hyuga, clan head, master of the gentle fist. A man defined by rigid adherence to tradition and a cold, ruthless pragmatism. A man who saw the world in terms of strength and weakness, assets and threats. Naruto had become a threat. Hinata's collapse was the catalyst. Hiyashi wouldn't believe it was mere exhaustion. He would suspect a new jutsu, a secret weapon, an unknown variable that had bested his clan's most prized possession. This summons wasn't a questioning, it was an interrogation. A test. An attempt to pry open the anomaly that was Naruto Uzumaki and dissect its contents. He had to play this perfectly. To go as himself, the cosmic prince Naruto, would be an act of war. To reveal even a fraction of his true power would put this entire world at risk. But to go as the complete village idiot, the Dobi, would invite suspicion and, potentially, a more forceful investigation. Hiyashi would not be satisfied with simple denials from a simpleton. He needed a third option. A tightrope walk between the two personas. He would wear the mask of the fool, but his words and actions would carry a subtle, razor-sharp edge, a message aimed directly at Hiyashi, and only Hiyashi. A quiet warning, spoken in a language of power the Hyuga patriarch would understand. He let the consoles fade and walked to the center of the platform. His pajamas dissolved, replaced by his standard, garish orange jumpsuit. It was the perfect camouflage, a visual declaration of foolishness and a lack of taste. He ran a hand through his hair, making sure it was perfectly spiky and unkempt. He practiced his grin in the reflection of the dark floor, making sure it was wide, guileless, and slightly vacant. The mask was in place. He took a deep, calming breath, the recycled air of the observatory filling his lungs. He then stepped back through the portal, the silent universe of his home vanishing behind the facade of a dusty, rundown apartment. It was time for his performance to begin. The Hyuga compound was less a home and more a fortress of tradition. The outer walls were stark white, meticulously maintained, with no sign of wear or age. Inside the gate, Naruto was met by two more silent clan guards who escorted him through the labyrinthine grounds. The path was made of perfectly raked white gravel, each stone in its proper place, creating swirling patterns that echoed the flow of chakra. There were no flowers, only meticulously pruned bonsai trees and smooth, moss-covered stones arranged in gardens that were beautiful but cold, lacking any sense of spontaneity or life. The silence was the most unnerving part. In the rest of Konoha, there was always a background hum of activity. Here, the silence was an active force, broken only by the crunch of their feet on the gravel and the distant lonely cry of a hawk circling overhead. Every sliding screen he passed seemed to have a shadow behind it, the pale eyes of the Byakugan watching, judging. It was a gilded cage, and he was being led to its very center. He was shown into the southern audience chamber. The room was vast and minimalist. The floor was made of tatami mats so perfectly fitted that the seams were nearly invisible. The walls were unadorned paper screens. In the center of the far wall, on a raised platform, sat Hiyashi Hyuga. He sat in the formal Seiza position, his back ramrod straight, his hands resting on his knees. He wore formal black robes, the symbol of the Hyuga clan embroidered in white on his back. His long, dark hair was tied back, and his pale eyes, so like his daughter's, were cold and hard as diamonds. To his right sat his nephew, Neji Hyuga. The boy prodigy stared at Naruto with open contempt, his arms crossed, his expression a mask of arrogant disdain. He had always seen Naruto as a failure, a disgrace to the ninja arts. This summons, in his mind, was long overdue. And to Hiyashi's left, also kneeling in Seiza, was Hinata. Her head was bowed, her dark hair hiding her face. But Naruto could feel the tremor running through her small frame. She was terrified, not for herself, he realized, but for him. The sight of her, so small and so brave in this cold, imposing room, struck a chord deep within him. Naruto Uzumaki. Hiyashi's voice was a low, powerful baritone that filled the silent room. It was not a greeting. It was an accusation. You were summoned to account for the events of yesterday. My daughter, the heiress to this clan, collapsed in your presence. It is reported that her Byakugan was overwhelmed. Explain yourself. Naruto bowed deeply, a gesture that was slightly too clumsy, too exaggerated. Hiyashi-sama, I am so sorry, he exclaimed, his voice filled with a carefully rehearsed panic. It's all my fault. I was trying to show off a new jutsu I was working on. And I guess I messed it up. It was supposed to be this super cool, super bright chakra flare, you know. Like a flash bomb, but with my own energy. But I put too much juice into it, and it kinda went, whoosh. I didn't mean to scare Hinata, I swear. He looked up, his face a perfect picture of earnest, idiotic regret. Neji snorted in disgust. Chakra flare. Do not insult our intelligence, Uzumaki. Such a rudimentary technique, even if performed by a failure like you, would not be enough to overwhelm a Hyuga's Byakugan. You are lying. Neji, Hiyashi said, the single word sharp enough to cut. Neji fell silent, but his glare intensified. Hiyashi's cold eyes remained fixed on Naruto. Chakra flare, you say. Your control has always been notoriously poor. It is plausible, however. The integrity of the Hyuga dojutsu is not a matter for childish games. You will demonstrate this technique. Now, this was the moment. The test. Naruto's grin widened. Sure thing. No problem. He looked around the room. But maybe not in here. I don't want to scorch your fancy walls. His gaze fell upon a magnificent bonsai tree resting in an alcove, its tiny leaves perfectly shaped, its branches twisted into a living sculpture. It was probably centuries old, a priceless heirloom. He walked over to it, ignoring the sharp intake of breath from Neji. How about this? Naruto said, plucking a single, perfect leaf from the bonsai. I'll just use a little bit of chakra this time. Don't wanna make the same mistake twice, right? He held the leaf delicately between his thumb and forefinger. Hiashi leaned forward ever so slightly, his Byakugan activating. Veins bulged at his temples as he focused his legendary vision on the leaf, on Naruto's hand, ready to dissect the flow of any jutsu. Naruto closed his eyes, a look of intense concentration on his face, as if he were trying to lift a mountain. Okay. Here we go. He channeled a stream of energy into the leaf. But it was not chakra. It was a microscopic, infinitesimally small thread of Star Forge energy, a single photon's worth of power, controlled with a precision that could rewrite planetary physics. He didn't make the leaf glow. He didn't make it burn or flash. He made it hum. It was not a sound. It was a vibration at the very edge of perception, a subatomic resonance that had no business existing in this dimension. To a normal person, nothing had happened. The leaf simply sat in his fingers, green and unremarkable. But to the Byakugan of a master like Hiashi Hyuga, it was a cataclysm. He wasn't seeing a flow of blue chakra. He was seeing the very structure of the leaf's cells being held in a state of perfect, impossible stasis. The energy signature was not a river, it was a single, infinitely dense .0 golden light that seemed to warp the space around it. It was a level of control so absolute, so alien, that it defied every principle of chakra he had ever known. It was like watching someone stop a hurricane with a whisper. He wasn't just controlling the energy, he was the energy. Hiyashi's eyes widened, the only crack in his icy composure. He understood the message. It was a display of power so subtle that it was deafening. It was a whisper that screamed, I could unmake you. I could unravel your genetic code with less effort than it takes you to breathe. You are looking into an abyss you cannot comprehend. Back away. See, Naruto said, opening his eyes and grinning, blissfully, unaware of the silent war he had just won. Just a little leaf. Nothing to worry about. He blew on the leaf, and it disintegrated into a fine, sparkling dust that evaporated before it hit the floor. A tense, heavy silence descended upon the room. Hiashi stared at Naruto, his mind reeling. Neji just looked confused and angry, having seen nothing but a failure's pathetic theatrics. It was Hinata who broke the silence. She lifted her head, and for the first time, she looked directly at her father. Her lavender eyes, though still holding a trace of fear, were filled with a new, unwavering resolve. Father. Her voice was soft, but it did not tremble. It was clear and steady. Naruto-kun is telling the truth, she said, her gaze firm. I was not feeling well yesterday. My training has been strenuous. My eyes were strained. The flash startled me, but the fault was with my own fatigue, not with his jutsu. I apologize for causing the clan such undue concern over a moment of personal weakness. She bowed her head, a perfect, formal apology. But it was an act of rebellion. She had lied to her father, the head of the clan. She had corroborated the story of an outcast to protect him. She had chosen Naruto over the cold, hard pride of the Hyuga. Naruto looked at her, his feigned smile softening or a fraction of a second into something real, something filled with genuine surprise and admiration. He had come here to protect himself, but she, in her own quiet way, had just protected him. Hiyashi's jaw was tight. He knew he was being lied to. He knew his daughter was covering for the boy. He could see the truth of her falsehood in the steady, unwavering flow of her chakra. But she had given him no opening. She had taken the blame, framing it in the language of Hyuga discipline, fatigue, weakness, apology. To punish Naruto now would be to openly declare that his own daughter was a liar, a public shaming he could not afford. He was cornered, outmaneuvered not by the boy's impossible power, but by his own daughter's quiet courage. He closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, his composure was perfectly restored. Very well, he said, his voice like chipping ice. The matter is closed. He looked at Naruto, his eyes promising that this was far from over. Uzumaki, you are dismissed. Do not let your reckless behavior cause trouble for this clan again. You got it, sir. Thank you for your time. Naruto gave another clumsy bow and practically bounced out of the room, the mask of the fool firmly back in place. As he was escorted out of the silent, oppressive compound and back into the vibrant, living chaos of Konoha, he didn't feel triumph. He felt a profound, unexpected warmth. He had walked into the lion's den expecting to face the lion alone. He had not expected a gentle dove to stand by his side and face it with him. Hundreds of kilometers away, in the salt-sprayed ruins of Uzushiogakure, a very different kind of tension was in the air. No, no, no. The plasma conduit cannot be rerouted through the tertiary life support system. The energy differential is too high. You'll overload the entire network. Lala gestured wildly at the holographic schematics of her pod, her pink hair flying. She was covered in grease, her futuristic outfit smudged with carbon scoring. But her eyes shone with the manic glee of an inventor in their element. Her audience of one, Eve, sat cross-legged on a smooth, flat stone a few feet away. She was not looking at the schematics. She was looking at a small, colorful, paper-bound book that Naruto had left for her. It was a collection of Earth fairy tales. She held a half-eaten taiyaki in her other hand. The logic of your statement is sound, Eve said without looking up from her book. She took a small, precise bite of the taiyaki. However, my purpose is not to assist you in repairing your transportation. My former contract has been nullified. My current operational directive is undefined. Lala threw her hands up in exasperation. But we're stuck here. Don't you want to leave? This location is adequate, Eve replied, turning a page. The story was The Ugly Duckling. She found its narrative arc about transformation and finding one's true kin to be compelling data. The atmospheric conditions are stable. Structural integrity of this chamber is sound. And the one known as Naruto provides a steady supply of these fish-shaped nutrient cakes. The current situation does not necessitate immediate departure. He's not just the one known as Naruto. He saved us, Lala retorted, poking at a console. And these aren't nutrient cakes, they're taiyaki. They're delicious. The point is, we should be helping him. Not just sitting here reading. Quote, Eve finally looked up from her book, her crimson eyes analytical. My assistance would be of limited value. My primary function is combat. Your primary function is inventive engineering. Our skill sets do not logically overlap in a way that would increase the efficiency of these repairs. Furthermore, she added, holding up the book, this literary database is fascinating. The concept of a happily ever after is statistically improbable, yet it is a recurring motif. I require more data to understand its cultural significance. Lala stared at the deadly, living weapon who was more interested in fairy tales and snacks than escaping their predicament. An exasperated sigh escaped her lips, but it quickly turned into a small giggle. It was absurd, it was insane, and it was, strangely, the most normal she had felt in weeks. She wasn't a princess. Eve wasn't an assassin. They were just two girls, stuck in a ruin, with a broken spaceship and a shared gua. RDIAN angel who fought with swords of light and delivered baked goods via teleportation. Fine, Lala said, a grin spreading across her face. But when I get this working, you owe me a ride. And you're not allowed to turn your arm into a giant cannon inside the cockpit. Eve considered this for a moment. A reasonable stipulation, she agreed, and returned to her story, a tiny, almost imperceptible smile gracing her lips. Back in the observatory, Naruto watched the aftermath of his departure from the Hyuga compound. He had left a microscopic star-forged sensor, smaller than a grain of dust, on the bonsai tree. It fed him a perfect audiovisual feed. He saw Hinata remain kneeling before her father as Neji was dismissed. He watched as Hiyashi rose and walked towards his daughter, his shadow falling over her. You defied me, Hinata, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Hinata did not flinch. She remained kneeling, her head bowed. I spoke the truth as I saw fit to preserve the peace, father. You chose to protect an outsider, a known failure, over the honor of this clan. I chose to protect a citizen of Konoha from an unjust accusation, she replied, her voice gaining a strength Naruto had never heard from her before. That is the duty of a shinobi. That is the honor of this clan. Hiyashi was silent for a long time. He looked down at his daughter, at the girl he had always considered a failure, too gentle, too weak to lead, and for the first time, he saw not weakness, but a different kind of strength. A strength not of the fist, but of the spirit. He finally turned and walked away without another word, leaving her alone in the vast, silent chamber. Naruto deactivated the feed, the image of Hinata, small but unbowed, lingering in his mind. He had thought of her as kind, gentle, and shy. He had underestimated her. The girl who saw the universe inside him had a will as strong as any star. He had come to Earth seeking a sanctuary, a place to hide from the ghosts of his past. He had built walls of secrecy and deception to keep the world at bay. But now, cracks were forming in those walls. A runaway princess with a genius mind, a living weapon searching for a soul, a gentle ninja with eyes that could see the truth. His carefully constructed solitude was ending. And as he looked at the swirling star charts of his hidden home, he found that for the first time in a long time, he was not afraid of what came next. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Guardian and the Gathering Storm. The morning sun cast long, golden fingers across the tumbled stones of Uzushiogakure, chasing the last of the sea mist from the hollows of the ruins. The air, usually sharp with the bite of salt and the chill of ancient stone, was filled with a new and altogether alien scent, that of sizzling teriyaki sauce. Perched on a flat, sun-warmed slab of granite overlooking the churning sea, Naruto tended to a makeshift kitchen that was anything but primitive. A perfectly circular, meter wi. The disk of black material hovered a foot off the ground, its surface glowing with a soft, even heat. This was his skillet, a star-forged construct of contained thermal energy, its temperature regulated to within 1/10 of a degree. Beside it, a knife with a blade of shimmering, semi-translucent light diced vegetables in midair, guided by his minute gestures. Each slice was mathematically perfect. He wore his simple black training pants and a t-shirt, the picture of domestic tranquility, a stark contrast to the cosmic power he was casually wielding to make breakfast. And if you recalibrate chronoton emitters to operate in a quantum superposition, you can create a localized field where the concept of being broken is merely a suggestion. Lala Satalan Deviluk declared, her voice bubbling with the sheer joy of theoretical physics. She sat nearby, cross-legged amidst a chaotic nest of wires, power conduits, and diagnostic tools she had salvaged from her pod. In her hands, she was tinkering with a small, floating sphere that hummed and blinked with a friendly blue light. Then, I could just tell the ship's engine that it's not broken, and it would have to agree. The only problem is generating the required 1.21 petawatts of power without creating a black hole the size of this island. A logistical hurdle, Naruto commented without looking up from the sizzling fish he was searing. You could try using a fractal power distribution matrix to spread the load across 11 dimensions, but your emitters aren't designed to handle trans-dimensional stress. They'd turn into very expensive, very pink spaghetti. Lala's hands froze. Her emerald eyes went wide as she stared at him. A fractal matrix, of course. That would solve the resonance cascade issue. How did you? You're not even looking at my schematics. I don't need to, Naruto said, deftly flipping the fish with a spatula made of hardened light. It's an elegant solution to the wrong problem. You're trying to ignore the damage instead of fixing it. It's intellectually lazy. He gave her a sideways glance, a small, teasing smile playing on his lips. It was a genuine smile, one he rarely used outside the confines of this strange new family. Lala puffed out her cheeks, a mixture of indignation and awe on her face. It is not. It's efficient. From a few feet away, seated in a patch of shade cast by a crumbling archway, came a quiet, analytical voice. The literary protagonist of this narrative, known as Sherlock Holmes, frequently espouses the belief that one should never theorize before one has data, Eve stated. She held a worn copy of The Detective's Adventures, another book Naruto had materialized for her. Your suggestion-based repair is a theory without data. It is illogical. She took a thoughtful bite of a fresh taiyaki, her crimson eyes scanning the page, absorbing the principles of human deduction. See, even the living weapon thinks your idea is crazy, Naruto teased. My designation is Eve, the girl corrected automatically, though there was no heat in her voice. And I am not a weapon. I am a reader. She seemed to be testing the word, seeing how it fit. She found she liked it more than assassin. This was their new normal. A bizarre tableau of cosmic power, inventive genius, and lethal innocence, all set against the melancholy backdrop of a dead city. For the past 2 days, since the confrontation with the Hyuga, Naruto had settled into a new role, that of guardian and provider. He would translocate to the mainland for supplies, returning with fresh food, tools for Lala, and books for Eve. He found a strange comfort in the routine, a sense of purpose that went beyond mere survival. He was no longer just the keeper of a dead legacy, he was the anchor for 2 living, breathing souls who had been cast adrift, much like himself. Once breakfast, perfectly cooked sea bass with stir-fried vegetables, was consumed, Naruto stood and stretched, the morning sun warming his back. All right, lesson time. Lala and Eve looked up at him, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and, in Lala's case, restless energy. A lesson in what? Advanced particle physics. I could teach you a thing or two. Lala volunteered eagerly. History, Naruto said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. He started walking towards the center of the ruins, gesturing for them to follow. My history. The history of this place. He led them through the silent, winding streets, his feet finding the path with an easy familiarity. He pointed to the massive, spiraling patterns carved into the city's very foundations, visible even through the overgrown moss and weeds. The official history, the one they teach in Konoha's academy, is that the Uzumaki were distant cousins of the Senju clan, masters of Fuinjutsu, the sealing arts. He began, his voice echoing slightly in the narrow stone corridors. They say this city, Uzushiogakure, was destroyed by an alliance of other villages because they feared our power. He stopped before a massive, crumbling wall covered in complex, interlocking spirals and geometric patterns. It looked like a vast, intricate piece of art. This is a sealing array. The academy would teach that it was designed to, say, seal away a great evil or create an impenetrable barrier. Lala ran a hand over the stone, her eyes alight with intellectual curiosity. The energy patterns are incredible. The geometry, it's not just for sealing. It's a massive energy conduit. It's designed to draw in ambient energy, amplify it, and focus it. It's a planetary scale amplifier. Naruto nodded, impressed as always by her intellect. Exactly. The Uzumaki weren't just masters of sealing. That's a primitive interpretation. They were masters of energy manipulation and resonance. They didn't just lock things away. They understood the fundamental frequencies of the world. He placed his palm on the wall, and for a second, the ancient stone lines glowed with a soft, golden light. His star forge energy resonating with the dormant technology. They didn't build this city as a fortress. They built it as an instrument to listen to the planet. Eve, who had been silently observing, tilted her head. Listen for what? Before Naruto could answer, the weather began to turn. The bright morning sun was swallowed by a bank of dark, heavy clouds rolling in from the open ocean. The wind picked up, its mournful howl intensifying as it whipped through the ruins. The temperature dropped, and the air grew heavy with the smell of rain and ozone. A storm was coming, a big one, and as if on cue, the island itself screamed a warning. It wasn't a sound, but a psychic and technological shriek that resonated through Naruto's being. The perimeter sensors he had integrated into the island's ancient arrays flared, sending a frantic alert directly to his consciousness. An entity was approaching, fast. Its energy signature was a chaotic, violent storm in itself, a maelstrom of raw chakra intertwined with something else, something ancient and powerful and utterly alien to any life form he had yet encountered on this planet. What was that? Lala asked, clutching her floating gadget as the wind whipped her hair across her face. Trouble, Naruto said, his jaw tight. His eyes were fixed on the churning, dark sea to the north. Both of you, back to the tower. Now. But, Lala started to protest. Now, Naruto repeated, his voice leaving no room for argument. The shift from gentle teacher to commanding protector was instantaneous and absolute. Eve simply nodded, her hand instinctively reaching for the hilt of a blade that wasn't there, a ghost of her former self. She took Lala by the arm and pulled her back towards the safety of the shielded tower, casting one last look at Naruto's rigid, powerful form silhouetted against the darkening sky. Naruto didn't watch them go. He was already moving, flowing through the ruins towards the cliffs overlooking the northern beach. The source of the disturbance. The approaching energy signature was erratic, panicked. It wasn't an attack. It was a desperate flight. And it was being pursued. 4 smaller, more disciplined chakra signatures were closing in on it, harrying it, driving it towards the island. He reached the edge of the cliff just as the first fat drops of rain began to fall. Below, on the dark, wave-battered stretch of sand, the scene unfolded. A girl, no older than himself, with mint-green hair tied in a high ponytail and bright orange eyes wide with fear and exhaustion, stumbled through the surf. She wore the standard flak jacket of a Takigaker ninja, but her body was flickering, enveloped in a shimmering, blue-green aura of immense power. From her back, 6 translucent, shimmering wings, like those of a dragonfly, sprouted and beat frantically, keeping her just above the crashing waves. This was Fu, the Jinchuriki of the 7 Tails. Behind her, 4 ninja from her own village landed gracefully on the beach. They spread out, boxing her in. Their leader, a tall man with a stern face and the distinctive forehead protector of Takigaker, stepped forward. Fu, this has gone on long enough, he yelled, his voice barely audible over the roar of the wind and sea. You are to surrender and return to the village at once. Lord Shibuki is not a patient man. I haven't done anything wrong, Futsu. The girl, Fu, cried out, her voice cracking with desperation. I just wanted to see what was outside the village. I just wanted to make friends. You have lost control of the 7 Tails. You are a danger to everyone. Futsu retorted, making a series of hand signs. We will seal you and drag you back if we must. Water style. Ripping torrent. A jet of high-pressure water shot from the man's mouth, aimed not to kill, but to incapacitate. Fu cried out, and the blue-green aura around her exploded outwards, forming a shield that vaporized the water jet on contact. The power was immense, but wild and uncontrolled. You see, the beast is controlling you. Futsu yelled to his comrades. Subdue her. The 4 ninjas surged forward. This was not a rescue. It was a hunt. A posse sent to recapture what they saw as a runaway weapon. Naruto had seen enough. He didn't use translocation. That was a tool of shock and awe. This situation required a different approach. He walked down the ancient, winding cliff path, his steps steady and sure-footed on the slick, rain-lashed stone. The storm broke in earnest, a torrential downpour that soaked him instantly, plastering his black t-shirt to his skin. He reached the beach, the cold waves washing over his boots, and simply walked forward, placing himself directly between the charging Taki Nin and the terrified girl. He didn't raise his hands. He didn't adopt a fighting stance. He just stood there, a calm, immovable object in the heart of the storm. That's far enough, he said. His voice was quiet, yet it cut through the gale with absolute authority. The 4 ninjas skidded to a halt, their eyes wide with surprise. Who the hell are you? Futsu demanded. This is official Takigaker business. Step aside, or you will be eliminated. This island is Uzushio, Naruto stated, his blue eyes cold and hard as the sea itself. It is sacred ground, and you are trespassers. Your business ends here. The last Uzumaki is dead. One of the other ninjas sneered. This land is cursed, not sacred. Get out of our way. The man lunged, drawing a kunai. Naruto didn't even look at him. He raised a single hand, palm open. A wall of translucent golden light, humming with power, sprang from the wet sand, blocking the ninja's path. The man crashed into it with a dull thud and slid to the ground, stunned. Futsu's eyes widened. What is this jutsu? It is a warning, Naruto said calmly. Leave now. The girl is under my protection. She is a Jinchuriki, a weapon belonging to our village. Futsu countered, enraged. We will not abandon our duty. All of you, attack him. Water style. Wild water wave. The 3 remaining ninja, along with their leader, unleashed a barrage of powerful water-style jutsu. A massive wave, dozens of meters high, rose from the sea, threatening to smash Naruto and Fu against the cliffs. Naruto stood his ground. He reached out with his power, not to block the wave, but to command it. He didn't weave a single hand seal. He simply connected his will to the water, his Star Forge energy resonating with its molecular structure. The towering, roaring wave of death froze in midair. The water hung suspended, silent and still, droplets glistening in the stormy light. Then, With a casual flick of his wrist, he parted the wave down the middle, sending it crashing harmlessly to either side of him. The tacky ninja stared, their mouths agape in utter disbelief. They had not just seen their most powerful combined attack fail, they had seen it be taken from them and dismissed as if it were nothing. Impossible, Futsu breathed. Naruto's focus, however, was no longer on them. It was on the girl behind him. The display of power, both his and her pursuers, had pushed Fu over the edge. Her desperate control shattered, her eyes rolled back in her head, and the blue-green chakra exploded outwards. A massive, insectoid tail, then another, and another, burst from her back until 7 were lashing the air. Her skin began to peel away, revealing a shimmering, armored carapace beneath. The 7 tails, Chome, was forcefully manifesting. A monstrous, chittering roar echoed across the beach, a sound of pure rage and ancient pain. But Naruto didn't hear a monster. He reached out with his consciousness, with the very essence of the Star Forge, and bypassed the frightened girl to touch the mind of the beast within. He did not see a demon of mindless destruction. He saw a vast, ancient consciousness, a being of immense power and profound loneliness, trapped for centuries within a succession of human hosts, its power used as a tool of war. Its voice unheard. He saw a guardian, one of 7, created in a time before humans to protect the planet's life force. Its form was insectoid, its mind alien, but its soul was one of weary, sorrowful duty. The rage of the beast slammed against his mind, a tidal wave of pain and fury. Naruto did not build a wall against it. He opened the floodgates and let it in, and he sent back a single, pure, undiluted thought. It was not a word, but a feeling, a concept, a truth. I see you, Guardian. I see your purpose. You are not a weapon. You are not a monster. You are a protector, and you are not alone. The psychic roar faltered. The rampaging chakra aura flickered. In the chaotic mind of the tailed beast, Naruto's consciousness was a point of pure, golden light, a star of calm in a sea of rage. For the first time in centuries, a being was speaking to Chome, not to its Jinchuriki. It was acknowledging its true nature. The shock of it was more powerful than any sealing jutsu. Slowly, carefully, the immense blue-green chakra began to recede, flowing back into the girl. The armored carapace dissolved, and the shimmering wings faded. Fu collapsed onto the sand, the transformation reversing completely, leaving her human, unconscious, and soaked by the rain. Naruto turned his gaze back to the 4 stunned Tokigakure ninja, who had watched the monstrous transformation begin and then mysteriously halt. She is not a weapon to be caged, he said, his voice ringing with an authority that seemed to echo with the power of the storm itself. She is a child who needs sanctuary. As the last of the Uzumaki, I claim that right for her. This is sacred ground, a refuge for those who are hunted. Her included. He took a step forward. You have 2 choices. You can leave this island in peace and report that Fu has found asylum with the Uzumaki clan. Or you can attempt to take her from me. He let the unspoken threat hang in the air, heavier than the storm clouds. You have seen a fraction of my power. Do you truly wish to see the rest? Futsu stared at the man before him. He had seen him control water, create shields of light, and somehow quell a rampaging lead beast with no seals and no apparent effort. This was no ordinary ninja. The rumors of Uzushio being cursed were wrong. It was protected. He grit his teeth in frustration and fear. He looked at his stunned comrades, then back at Naruto. He made the only logical choice. We will report what has transpired, Futsu said, his voice tight with humiliation. But Lord Shibuki will not take this lightly. Tokigakure will consider this an abduction of our Jinchuriki. Consider it whatever you wish, Naruto replied, his voice indifferent. Now leave. With a final, hateful glare, Futsu and his team turned and vanished in a flicker of movement, their retreat as swift as their attack had been futile. The beach fell silent, the only sounds now the rain and the sea. The storm, its fury spent, began to soften. The downpour easing into a steady drizzle. Naruto walked over to the unconscious form of Fu, her mint green hair plastered to her face, her expression peaceful for the first time. He knelt beside her, a profound sense of empathy filling him. Another stray, another soul cast adrift. Another person hunted for the power they held. From the top of the cliffs, Lala and Eve watched as the last of the Taki nin vanished. They had seen everything. Lala's mind was struggling to process the physics of parting a tidal wave. Eve's was trying to reconcile Naruto's gentle, teasing nature with the cold, absolute authority he had just displayed. Down on the beach, Naruto gently brushed the wet hair from Fu's face. He smiled, a genuine, warm smile of welcome. He reached out and offered her a hand, even though she was not awake to take it. The rain washed over the ruins, a symbolic cleansing, as the strange, isolated family of a cosmic prince, a genius princess, and a literary assassin gained its fourth, unsuspecting member. The universe was getting smaller, and his sanctuary was getting crowded. And Naruto found he did not mind at all. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. Echoes of Uzu, Whispers of Earth. Consciousness returned not as a jarring shock, but as a slow, gentle tide washing over the shores of a dreamless sleep. The first sensation to register in Fu's mind was warmth. It was a clean, dry warmth that seeped into her bones. A stark contrast to the biting cold of the storm-lashed beach and the chilling fear that had preceded her collapse. The second sensation was the surface beneath her. It was not the damp sand, nor was it the hard, unforgiving floor of the sealing chamber in Tokigakure she had half expected. It was soft, yielding, a material that seemed to sigh with comfort as she shifted. Her eyelids, heavy as stone shutters, fluttered open. The light was muted, a soft, ambient glow that emanated from the very walls of the chamber, which were a seamless, pale cream color. The room was Spartan but not unkind. It contained only the comfortable bed she lay on and a single, low table. There were no bars on the windows because there were no windows. There were no chains, no ceiling tags plastered to the walls. No grim-faced guards standing watch. The oppressive, ever-present weight of being a prisoner, a burden she had carried her entire life, was conspicuously, terrifyingly absent. This absence of threat was, in its own way, more disorienting than any attack. A soft rustle of paper drew her attention. In a simple chair in the far corner of the room, partially cloaked in shadow, sat the blonde girl with the crimson eyes. The assassin. The one who had arrived on the island just before the storm. Her face was placid, her gaze fixed on a book resting in her lap. She seemed utterly engrossed, her presence as quiet and unobtrusive as a piece of furniture. She was not a guard, she was simply, there. Fu's breath hitched, her muscles tensed, her body preparing for the inevitable betrayal. The attack that must surely be coming. She instinctively reached for the power within her, for the roaring, angry presence of Chome. Your autonomic nervous system is exhibiting a classic fight or flight response. The blonde girl stated, her voice a calm, flat monotone. She didn't look up from her book. Your heart rate has increased by approximately 40 beats per minute, and your adrenaline levels are spiking. It is an unnecessary expenditure of metabolic energy. You are not in danger. Fu froze, the sheer unexpectedness of the girl's clinical assessment short-circuiting her panic. Who? Where am I? She managed, her voice a rough whisper. You are in a habitation chamber within the primary tower of the Uzushio ruins, the girl replied, finally closing her book, her finger marking her place. Her crimson eyes met Fu's. They were not filled with malice or contempt, but with a serene, analytical curiosity. The one known as Naruto brought you here after neutrally. Zing the threat from your former village associates. My designation is Eve. Eve. The name meant nothing to Fu. The door to the chamber slid open with a near-silent hiss, revealing the boy from the beach. Naruto. He wore simple clothes, and he carried a wooden tray laden with steaming bowls. The aroma of savory rice porridge and hot tea filled the small room, a scent so wonderfully, devastatingly normal that it made Fu's eyes water. I see you're awake, Naruto said, his smile gentle, his blue eyes holding no trace of the cold authority they'd held during the storm. You've been out for about a day. I figured you might be hungry. He placed the tray on the low table, his movements easy and unthreatening. Fu flinched back against the headboard, pulling her knees to her chest. This was a trick. It had to be. Kindness was a weapon, a tool used to lower her guard before the sealing teams moved in. Naruto seemed to read her thoughts. He didn't move closer. He simply sat down on the floor, a comfortable distance away. The girl you were with before, he began, his voice soft, the princess. Her name is Lala. She wanted to be here when you woke up, but she's busy trying to invent a new foe. Of matter using nothing but a broken toaster and sheer optimism. It's probably better for your recovery that she's not here. She's enthusiastic. He gestured to the food. It's just rice porridge. No poison, no sedatives. Eve can verify. Her senses are more acute than any chemical analysis lab. Eve tilted her head. The molecular composition of the sustenance is consistent with standard Earth-based nutritional staples. The thermal reading is optimal for consumption. There are no detectable anomalous chemical agents. Fu stared at them, her mind reeling. The boy who commanded the CNT. He assassin who spoke like a science textbook. This was a dream. A very strange, very specific dream. She watched as Naruto slid one of the bowls across the floor towards her bed. Her stomach rumbled, a traitorous declaration of her own needs. Slowly, hesitantly, she reached out and took the bowl. The ceramic was warm, grounding. She took a tentative spoonful. The flavor was simple, clean, and delicious. Why? Fu asked, the single word encompassing 1,000 questions. Why save her? Why be kind? Why feed her? Because you were scared and alone, and you needed help, Naruto answered simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. That's what people are supposed to do for each other. It was an answer so fundamentally at odds with her entire life experience that she didn't know how to respond. People didn't help her. They used her, feared her, caged her. As she ate, a fragile tendril of trust began to unfurl within her. This place, these people, they were different. Later, Lala did burst into the room. A whirlwind of pink hair and excited energy. She held up a small, sparking device that looked like a bird's nest made of wires and hope. I did it. I created a pocket reality stabilizer. It only works for 0.8 seconds and it smells like burnt toast, but it's a proof of concept. She announced proudly. Her eyes then fell on Fu. Oh, you're awake. Hi, I'm Lala. Your wings are amazing. Are they a biological mutation or a chakra construct? What's your maximum flight speed? Can you achieve supersonic travel? Does the membrane have regenerative properties? The barrage of questions was overwhelming. But it was so devoid of malice, so full of genuine, scientific curiosity, that Fu found herself shrinking back not in fear, but in simple bewilderment. Lala, Naruto said gently, putting a hand on the princess's shoulder. Breathe. Let her get her bearings. It was then that Naruto did something that changed everything. He looked directly at Fu, but his focus seemed to go deeper, past her eyes. Past her mind, to the roaring entity caged within. Chome, he said. The name was not spoken aloud. It was a projection of pure thought, a thread of golden, starlight energy. Why that bypassed Fu entirely and touched the core of the tailed beast. Are you well, guardian? Fu gasped. She felt it. A warm, calming presence enveloping the raging storm inside her. The constant, angry buzz of Chome's chakra. A background noise she had lived with her entire life, suddenly quieted. It wasn't suppressed or sealed. It was, listening. A response echoed back, not in words, but in a wave of ancient, surprised gratitude. Fu felt the beast's shock, its relief. For the first time, she was not just the vessel, she was a conduit for a conversation. Naruto smiled at her stunned expression. He says he is tired, but calm. He also says your name is Fu, and that you like the taste of honey. Tears welled in Fu's eyes. He wasn't just talking to her. He was talking to all of her. He saw the beast not as a monster, but as a being. He saw her not as a container, but as a person. In that single moment, the fragile tendril of trust became a deeply rooted certainty. This boy was safe. This place was home. That evening, as a sliver of a new moon rose in the sky, Fu sat with Naruto on the crumbling ramparts of the tower. Lala was back in her makeshift lab, and Eve was inside, having to declared that the humidity was detrimental to the preservation of paper-based artifacts. He's never been quiet before, Fu said softly, hugging her knees to her chest. Chome. It was always a roar. Anger. Pain. I thought it was my anger. My pain. But it's his. He's been a prisoner for a long time, Naruto said, his gaze on the distant, dark horizon. It's hard to be calm when you're in a cage. But I'm his cage, she whispered. The old guilt resurfacing. No, Naruto corrected gently. You're his partner. You've just never been taught how to work together. The people who put him inside you only saw a weapon. They never thought to listen to what he had to say. He paused. Does he ever show you things? Memories. Dreams that aren't your own? Fu frowned, thinking. Sometimes. When I'm really tired, or scared. They don't make sense. They're just feelings and pictures. Try to show me, Naruto urged, his voice soft. Just relax, and think about the last dream he gave you. Don't try to make sense of it. Just share it. Fu was hesitant, but she trusted him. She closed her eyes, focusing on the echo of the beast's consciousness, on the fragmented images that haunted the edges of her sleep. As she did, Naruto placed a hand gently on her shoulder. He wasn't just listening to her description. His Star Forge energy was creating a sympathetic resonance, allowing him to perceive He raw data directly from Chomei's memory, filtering it through Fu's mind. The world dissolved into a phantasmagoria of alien sensation. A sky the color of a deep bruise, dominated by a swollen, dying purple sun. The air smells of ozone and shattered crystal. Below, a forest of crystalline trees, their facets catching the dim light, chime with a sound like 1,000 tiny bells in a non-existent wind. The feeling of flight, not with Chomei's wings, but something else, something vaster. Soaring over a city of glowing, organic spires that pulsed with a slow, rhythmic light. The feeling is not Fu's fear or loneliness, but Chomei's sense of belonging, of being one of 7 guardians watching over a vibrant, thriving world. A psychic scream, a silent, mind-shattering shriek that tears across the cosmos. It is a sound of pure terror, the death cry of a billion souls at once. The purple sun darkens, the crystalline trees shatter, the vibrant world below goes silent. And then, the image. A swirling, all-consuming void. A patch of darkness that does not reflect light, but swallows it. It is not empty space, it is a presence. A hungry, sentient oblivion that moves between the stars, feeding on the light, on the life. On the very soul of the worlds it touches. The Zetsubo Imperium. Fu gasped and her eyes flew open, her heart pounding. The images faded, leaving her trembling. What was that? Naruto's face was grim, his eyes holding a depth of sorrow that seemed as vast as the night sky. He had seen this before. It was the memory of every Uzu survivor. It was the echo of his own homeworld's death. An old memory, he said, his voice tight. A great consuming darkness. He looked at Fu, a new understanding dawning. The tailed beasts weren't just guardians of Earth. They were survivors, refugees, just like him. Sent here in a time long past to protect this last cradle of life from the very same enemy that had destroyed their home. His isolation was an illusion. His kinship with this world ran deeper than he had ever imagined. The next day, under the pretense of a supply run, Naruto translocated. Not to a bustling market, but to a quiet, secluded training ground on the outskirts of Konoha. A place of tall grass and ancient, kunai-scarred trees. He knew she would be there. Hinata Hyuga was practicing her gentle fist forms, her movements fluid and graceful, a dance of deadly precision. But there was a new confidence in her stance, a firmness in her expression that hadn't been there a week ago. She stopped as he appeared in a soft shimmer of golden motes, her by. Akugan instantly perceiving the arrival of his unique, stellar signature. A soft, gentle smile touched her lips. Naruto-kun, she said, her voice barely carrying on the breeze. There was no stammer. Hinata, he replied, his own smile unforced. Around her, he didn't need the mask of the fool or the armor of the prince. He could just be. I saw what you did. In your father's chamber. Thank you. A blush crept up her cheeks. But she did not look away. You were being treated unfairly. I could not stand by and allow it. She hesitated, then reached into a pouch at her waist. She pulled out a small, hand-carved wooden charm, shaped like a swirling leaf. It was simple, imperfect, but made with obvious care. I made this. For luck. I know you do not need it, but... He took it from her. The wood was smooth and warm from her hand. Compared to his Star Forge constructs, it was laughably primitive. But it felt more real, more substantial, than any of them. It was a piece of this world. A piece of her. A simple, tangible connection. Thank you, Hinata. I'll keep it safe. Their hands brushed, and for a moment, Hinata's Byakugan flickered on reflex. She saw the swirling galaxy within him, but this time, she didn't flinch. She saw that vast, cosmic power coiled around the tiny, simple wooden charm he now held, cradling it with a gentleness that was breathtaking. She saw a god treasuring a child's gift. "The new arrival on your island," she said softly, deactivating her dojutsu. "The one with the great, sad power. Is she all right?" Naruto's eyes widened slightly. "You can sense her from here." Hinata shook her head. "Not her. I can sense the change in you. The light, it is less lonely." Before he could respond, she gave him a respectful bow. "I must return. My father is having me redouble my training." There was a wry smile on her face. "He believes my weakness can be cured with discipline." She turned and left, her steps sure and her back straight, leaving Naruto alone in the quiet grove. The small wooden charm clutched in his hand. That evening, the storm had passed completely, leaving behind a sky washed clean, awash with the fiery colors of sunset. Naruto led the three girls, Lala, Eve, and Fu, to the highest point of the ruins, a flat-topped pinnacle of stone that offered an unbroken view of the western sea. The air was cool and crisp. Naruto, with a simple gesture, created four small, softly glowing orbs of warm light that hovered in the air around them, warding off the chill. He set up another hovering disk of heat and began to grill fresh fish he'd brought back. The sizzle and smoke a comforting, homey counterpoint to the epic grandeur of the sunset. Lala was excitedly explaining her latest breakthrough to an attentive Fu. "So if I can just create a stable wormhole inside a bottle, I can basically have infinite storage space. I could keep my entire wardrobe in my pocket." Fu, her fear finally washed away, listened with wide-eyed wonder. "You could fit a whole closet in a bottle. That's amazing." Eve sat slightly apart, reading her book, but she was listening, a small, curious smile playing on her lips. She looked from the bickering girls to Naruto, who was calmly tending to the food, his face illuminated by the warm glow of his light orbs and the dying sun. He looked content, peaceful. He handed each of them a perfectly cooked fish on a leaf plate. They ate in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the clouds in impossible shades of orange, pink, and violet. Fu looked at the scene, the genius princess, the quiet assassin. The kind, powerful boy who had saved her. She looked at the spectacular beauty of the sunset, a sight she had never been allowed to simply sit and enjoy. A sound bubbled up from her chest. Something foreign and unfamiliar. It was laughter. A pure, free, joyous laugh that echoed in the quiet air. Lala and Naruto turned to look at her, surprised, and then their own smiles widened. Eve looked up from her book, her crimson eyes reflecting the vibrant sky, and her own small smile grew a little wider. Naruto looked at his strange, broken, beautiful family gather together on the bones of one dead home, and felt the foundations of a new one being laid. The quiet prince, the runaway princess, the living weapon, and the lonely guardian. They were a collection of loose threads from different, disparate worlds. But here, in the twilight, under his protection, they were beginning to weave themselves into a tapestry. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Carrion Star's Shadow. The heart of the observatory was a place of profound and absolute silence. Here, in the sanctum of his hidden home, surrounded by the slow, majestic ballet of real-time star charts, Naruto Uzumaki was not a ninja, not a guardian, but an astronomer of a different sort. He was a sentry, a lonely watchman on the highest tower, his gaze fixed upon the abyss. For 3 days, he had stood at the central console, foregoing sleep, sustaining himself on focused packets of pure star forge energy. The memories wrested from the mind of the tailed beast Chome had changed the fundamental nature of his mission. His long exile had not been an act of hiding, but an act of waiting. Now, he knew what he was waiting for. He had recalibrated every sensor, rewritten entire algorithms of his Uzu Tech listening arrays. He was no longer just monitoring for unsanctioned hyperspace travel or communications chatter. He was hunting for a ghost. He was searching for a specific energy signature, or rather, a lack thereof. The Zetsubo Imperium did not travel in ships of light and energy. They moved in shadows, in voids, in wounds carved into the fabric of space. He was looking for a patch of darkness that was too dark. A silence that was too silent. The work was mentally grueling. It was like listening for a single dissonant note in the symphony of the cosmos. He cross-referenced Chomei's fragmented memories with the Uzu Celestial Archives, a library of data stored in crystalline matrices that hummed with latent light. He found the designation, Kurai Hoshi, the carrion star. They were not merely probes. They were tasters, silent, insidious scouts that would drift into a planetary system, cloak themselves in a null energy field, and begin to sip at the world's ambient life force. They would analyze its resonance, its flavor, its potential as a meal, before sending a single, untraceable quantum-entangled signal back to the main fleet. The arrival of a carrion star was a death sentence delivered by messenger. The final verdict arriving weeks, months, or years later. His fingers, glowing with a soft golden light, danced across the holographic consoles. He felt the weight of his legacy, the crushing responsibility his parents had placed upon his shoulders. He was the last prince of a dead kingdom, the sole inheritor of a power created to build wonders, now tasked with using it to fight nightmares. The silence of the observatory was no longer a comfort, it was a countdown. Suddenly, 2 alerts chimed at once, their tones discordant and jarring in the silent chamber. One was a frantic, purely psychic shriek, a spike of raw terror that traveled along the mental link he had established with Fu. The second was a high-frequency digital signal on a hyper-encrypted channel, a channel known to only one other person on Earth. He focused on the psychic link first, his consciousness flying across the island to the tower where Fu slept. He didn't see her room, he saw her dream. It was a nightmare, but clearer and more coherent than before. She was looking through Chomei's ancient eyes, seeing not a memory, but a live feed. She saw a point of utter blackness hanging in the void near Earth's moon. It wasn't a shadow, it was a hole, a voracious, hungry spot of anti-energy that was drawing in the faint, silvery wisps of natural energy that permeated the solar system. The vision was imbued with Chomei's primal, instinctual terror. This was not a memory of the enemy. This was the enemy. Simultaneously, he accepted the incoming call. A small holographic window appeared, showing the face of Hinata Hyuga. She was in her family's dojo, sweat beading on her brow, her expression a mixture of pain and fierce urgency. Veins were still prominent at her temples, the sign of a recently used Byakugan. "Naruto-kun," she said, her voice tight with strain, foregoing any pleasantries. "Something is wrong. In the sky, Hinata, what do you see?" he asked, his voice calm and focused, betraying none of the cold dread creeping up his spine. "It is not something I can properly describe," she struggled, clutching her head. "It is not a ship. It is not a person. It is a hole, a smudge. When I look at it with the Byakugan, it doesn't have a chakra network, it absorbs it. The natural energy of the world, the very air, it flows towards that spot and vanishes. Looking at it gives me a blinding headache. It feels wrong. A cold, dead spot in a living world." Her description, combined with Chomei's vision, was the final piece of the puzzle. He triangulated the coordinates she gave him, a precise celestial location only the Byakugan could provide, with the psychic data from Fu. He commanded the observatory's main sensor array to focus on that exact point in space. On the massive spherical display, a section of the starfield magnified. It was empty, black space. But when Naruto began applying filters, shifting through quantum foam densities and gravitational lensing, a horrifying image resolved itself. It was a crystalline structure of obsidian-like material, shaped like a multifaceted, malevolent star. It did not reflect light. It seemed to inhale it. It was perfectly cloaked, perfectly hidden. A carrion star. It was already here. "Thank you, Hinata," Naruto said, his voice grim. "You did well. More than well. Now, for your own safety, do not look at it again." He cut the connection before she could ask any more questions, his mind already racing. A general alert chimed through the tower on Uzushio. Lala, Eve, Fu, to the observatory. Now, one by one, they appeared through the shimmering portal from their chambers, brought by a targeted translocation sequence. Lala arrived first, wiping grease from her cheek with the back of her hand, her eyes immediately going wide with technological rapture at the sight of the control room. "Whoa," she breathed, spinning in a slow circle. "This isn't a hideout. This is a Class 7 extraspatial command center. The energy readings are off the charts." Is this Uzu technology? The interface is bio-neural. It's beautiful. Eve appeared next. Her expression as placid as ever, but her crimson eyes scanned the star charts with keen interest. She took in the complexity, the scale, and the sheer power of the room with a single, sweeping glance, cataloging it all. Fu was the last to arrive, looking around not at the technology, but at the swirling nebulae and distant suns. It looks like the inside of your soul, she whispered, her fear of the nightmare momentarily forgotten in her awe. Welcome to my home, Naruto said, his tone devoid of any warmth. He pointed to the magnified image of the carrion star. And that is our problem. The mood in the room shifted instantly. Lala's excitement vanished, replaced by a focused, analytical frown. Eve stepped closer to the console, her reader's mind switching to its assassin's programming. Designation: Kurai Hoshi, Naruto began, his voice crisp and commanding, assuming the role of a leader he was born to but had never embraced. A Zetsubo deep space probe. Its purpose is to analyze this world's life energy and report back. If it succeeds, the Imperium will follow. It is cloaked in a quantum foam null field, which is why standard sensors can't see it. But thanks to Hinata's Byakugan and Chomei's unique sensory capabilities, we have its location. A quantum foam cloak, Lala muttered, her mind already racing, her fingers twitching as if she were manipulating invisible tools. That's why it felt wrong to the Hyuga girl's vision. It's disrupting the local reality matrix. To get through that, you'd need to create a temporary, synchronized rupture in the foam. A key to fit a keyhole that's constantly changing its shape. It's theoretically possible, but the processing power required would be immense. Quote, which is where you come in, Naruto said, turning to her. I need a key. I am the only one who can survive inside that thing and destroy it from within. I need you to get me through the front door. Quote, Lala's eyes lit up with a fire of fierce determination. This wasn't a game. This was the ultimate engineering challenge. I can do it, she said, her voice ringing with confidence. I'll need access to your power core, raw fabrication materials, and about 20 minutes. Peek. A small, silver robot popped out from her pocket, its single eye blinking. Let's get to work. Naruto gestured to a secondary console, and a stream of raw materials, rare earths, exotic crystals, conduits of pure energy, materialized from the observatory's fabricators. Lala and Peek dove in. A whirlwind of inventive genius. Naruto then turned to Eve. Threat analysis. We have no direct data on its internal defenses. Eve's crimson eyes were narrowed, focused on the probe's faint energy readings. It is not a sentient vessel in the way a living being is, she said, her voice precise. It is an automated system. Its purpose is analysis and self-preservation. It will not use tactics. It will use logic. Defenses will be automated, targeting intruders based on two criteria: unrecognized biological signatures and concentrated energy outputs. They will be efficient, reactive, and utterly without mercy. Your infiltration path must be swift and targeted directly at its control nexus. Any deviation will result in your immediate termination. She began interfacing with a console, her fingers flying across the holographic keys, designing a probable path of least resistance based on the probe's energy flow. Finally, Naruto looked at Fu, who stood uncertainly, feeling out of her depth amidst the cosmic strategy session. Fu, you and Chomei have the most important job of all. Us? She asked, surprised. That probe is feeding, Naruto explained. It's sipping energy from the planet. We are going to offer it a full meal. Chomei's chakra is potent, a delicacy. I need you to work with him, to project a controlled, concentrated burst of his power directly at the probe. It will be like ringing a dinner bell. The probe, in its greed, will lower a fraction of its defenses to open a wider channel to absorb the energy. That will create a momentary vulnerability in its power system, a flicker. And that flicker is the keyhole Lala's device will open. Fu's eyes widened. She wasn't just a power source, she was the bait. The key that started the entire plan. She nodded, her expression firming with resolve. She looked at Chomei in her mind's eye and felt a surge of agreement from the ancient guardian. This was their purpose. This was a hunt. The next 20 minutes were a symphony of controlled chaos. Lala worked like a possessed artist, sparks flying as she jury-rigged a device of Uzu materials and Devilicaon ingenuity, a complicated satellite dish of gold and silver. Bristling with antennas and humming with power, Eve plotted a three-dimensional path through the probe's interior on a holographic map, a deadly dance of timing and precision. Naruto stood in the center of the platform, his orange jumpsuit melting away in a cascade of light to be replaced by his matte black star-forged combat suit and featureless mask. "It's ready," Lala announced, wiping her brow as she made a final connection. "It's not pretty, but it'll create a single, 1.5-second stable rupture at the coordinates Eve is feeding it." "The path is plotted," Eve confirmed, her gaze locked on her display. "It will take you through 3 primary energy conduits to the central processing crystal. You will encounter automated defenses in each conduit." Naruto nodded. "Fu, on my mark." He looked at the small, determined girl. Fu closed her eyes, and a massive, visible aura of shimmering, blue-green chakra erupted around her. It was not the wild, uncontrolled rage of before, but a focused, disciplined torrent of power, shaped by her will and Chome's. "Now," Naruto commanded. Fu screamed, thrusting her hands forward. The torrent of chakra surged out of the observatory, eeling through a dimensional conduit and erupting into real space, a river of life force screaming towards the Carrion star. On the main screen, they saw it. The dark probe pulsed, a flicker of purple light across its surface as it greedily opened a channel to drink in the unexpected feast. "Node exposed," Eve yelled. "Lala, now." Lala slammed a large red button on her device. It whined, a high-pitched shriek of tortured physics, and fired a beam of crackling white energy at the main display. In the real world, that energy pierced the probe's weakened cloak. "Rupture stable for 1.5 seconds. Lala shouted. "Go." Naruto didn't hesitate. He stepped into the golden light of the translocation beam and vanished. The world he appeared in was a nightmare of alien architecture. He was in a corridor with no discernible floor or ceiling. The walls were made of a shifting, obsidian-like substance that seemed to absorb the light from his suit, and they pulsed with a sickening, slow rhythm, like the inside of a diseased lung. The air was frigid, tasting of ozone and a metallic, charnel tang of dead worlds. Just as Eve had predicted, his arrival triggered a response. Tendrils of solid black energy, whips of pure void, lashed out from the walls. He didn't break stride. His mind was a cold, calm computer, executing Eve's plan. A shield of golden hexagons sprang into existence on his left arm, deflecting the tendrils. A blade of pure light flared to life in his right hand, slicing through others. He moved with an inhuman grace, not fighting, but flowing through the defenses, his EV. A move calculated to conserve energy and time. He burst into the second conduit, a vast chamber where the very geometry seemed to fold in on itself. Here, the defenses were different. Orbs of gravitational distortion, spheres of crushed space, were launched at him. He didn't try to block them. He danced between them, using short, precise bursts of stellar translocation to blink past the deadliest attacks. The afterimage of his light the only sign he had been there. He reached the final corridor leading to the core. A single, massive entity of solidified shadow blocked his path, a sentinel created by the probe's immune system. It raised a limb to strike. Naruto didn't engage it. He simply translocated straight through it, its substance passing harmlessly through his light form, and appeared before the core chamber. He entered, and the chaos of the defenses gave way to a dead, cold silence. In the center of a vast, spherical chamber hung the heart of the Carrion star, a pulsating, black crystal the size of a house. It throbbed with a malevolent purple light, and he could feel it drinking in Chome's power, feel it tasting the life of his adopted world. He couldn't just shatter it. Eve had warned him. The raw, stolen life energy would be released in a devastating explosion. He had to perform a star forge inversion, a technique of the Uzu celestial architects, designed to safely decommission failing power cores. It was a technique that required absolute focus. He floated to the center of the chamber, placing his palms on the crystal's cold, vibrating surface. He closed his eyes, shutting out the alien horror around him. He reached deep into his own soul, into the swirling galaxy within, and drew upon its fundamental principles. He didn't push his energy into the crystal. He resonated with it. He found the frequency of its hunger, the rhythm of its consumption, and he began to sing it a new song. He introduced a simple, elegant paradox into its programming: feed. But instead of feeding on the universe outside, he commanded it to feed upon the universe inside. The crystal pulsed violently. The purple light flared. It began to consume itself. Cracks of golden light, Naruto's own energy, spread across its black surface. The entire probe began to groan and shudder, the alien architecture collapsing as its power source devoured itself from the inside out. Naruto pushed away, his work done. The crystal was now a self-sustaining implosion. He had seconds. "Lala, I'm coming home," he yelled into his suit's comm. He triggered his translocation just as the crystal collapsed into a single, silent, harmless point of nothingness. He reappeared on the observatory platform in a flash of gold, stumbling to one knee, the effort of the inversion having taken its toll. The black combat suit dissolved, leaving him in his simple training clothes, breathing heavily. Lala, Fu, and Eve rushed to his side, their faces a mixture of relief and awe. On the main screen, the image of the carrion star was gone. Vanished without a trace. They had won. Naruto looked up at them, a tired but triumphant smile on his face. He had faced a shadow of the enemy that had destroyed his people, and he had emerged victorious. But as he looked at the star chart, at the empty space where the probe had been, his smile faded. The victory felt hollow. This was just a scout, a doorbell, and they had just answered the door. The carrion star had tasted Earth's potent life force, had tasted the power of a tailed beast. It had tasted it, and it had, in its final moments, sent its report. He looked at the faces of his new family, the genius, the reader, the guardian. They had proven themselves a capable, formidable team. They would have to be. Because the Zetsubo Imperium now had Earth's coordinates. The silence from the void was broken. The real war was coming. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Tides of War and the Council of Kings. The victory was a silent, hollow thing. In the sterile, star-strewn void of the observatory, the adrenaline of the battle had evaporated, leaving behind a residue of cold, hard reality. The spot where the carrion star's icon had been was now just an empty patch of space. A void that screamed louder than any alarm. They had cut off a single tentacle of the Kraken, but in doing so, they had broadcast the location of their ship to the monster's unblinking eye. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Lala, her face smudged with grease and success, stared at the empty coordinates, the frantic energy of her inventive genius slowly being replaced by the dawning horror of her royal education. She understood galactic politics. She knew what a confirmed report from a Zetsubo scout meant. Eve, ever the analyst, had her eyes closed, her mind no doubt processing PR. Abilities that were rapidly approaching zero. Fu stood close to Naruto, her small hand clutching the back of his shirt, the psychic echo of Chomei's terror a cold hum in the back of her mind. It sent the report, Naruto stated. His voice quiet but resonant in the vast, silent room. He turned away from the main console, his featureless mask retracting to reveal a face carved from weary stone. The final data burst from the probe. Just before implosion, it was a confirmation of a Class A biosphere with a high-yield, exotic energy source. He looked directly at Fu. You were the main course in the taste test. And they found you delicious. Fu flinched, but a flicker of defiance sparked in her orange eyes. Chomei's fear was still there, but it was now tempered by a cold, ancient anger. They had been hunted once. They would not simply be prey again. So, what happens now? Lala asked, her voice small, stripped of its usual effervescent confidence. Now, they will come, Naruto answered. Not a fleet, not at first. They are subtle. They will send infiltrators, political disruptors, sleeper agents. They will try to destabilize the planet from within, soften it up, turn its people against each other. They will test its defenses, analyze its power structures. When it is sufficiently chaotic and weakened, the main fleet will arrive to feed. Eve opened her crimson eyes. A projected timeline, based on standard Zetsubo infiltration doctrine, would suggest an initial contact window of 3 to 6 standard solar cycles. Weeks, Naruto clarified for Fu. We have weeks, maybe a month or two if we're lucky. We have to warn someone. Lala exclaimed, her royal instincts kicking in. The Galactic Concord. My father. The mention of her father hung in the air, heavy and complicated. Before Naruto could respond, the observatory itself screamed a new alert. This was not a subtle whisper of a cloaked probe. This was a sledgehammer. A proximity alarm of overwhelming magnitude blared through the chamber, and the main spherical display shifted its focus from deep space to the skies directly above planet Earth. An image resolved that made Lala gasp and take a step back. Ripping rough the fabric of space-time in a shower of cerulean light and gravitational distortion, a fleet of ships emerged from hyperspace. They were not sleek or subtle. They were gargantuan, ostentatious vessels of gold and crimson, shaped like monstrous sea creatures and bristling with enough firepower to crack the planet open like a nut. At the center of the formation was a vessel so colossal it defied comprehension. A flagship that blotted out the stars behind it, its form that of a celestial dragon, miles long from its snarling, city-sized head to its lashing tail. The insignia on its hull was unmistakable. A stylized D, entwined with a devil's tail. "Father," Lala whispered, her face draining of all color. The Royal Devilicaon Armada had arrived. The sky over Uzushiogakure was no longer blue. It was a ceiling of metallic gold, a suffocating canopy of imperial power. The shadow of the fleet fell over the entire island, plunging the sun-drenched ruins into an unnatural twilight. The air grew heavy, charged with the energy radiating from the dozens of massive ships hanging in silent judgment in the upper atmosphere. The roar of the sea seemed muted, humbled by the sheer, arrogant presence of so much power. On the northern beach, where Naruto had first confronted Fu's pursuers, a pillar of shimmering, crystalline light descended from the heavens. It solidified, leaving behind a contingent of figures. At their head was a man with lilac hair and a perpetually weary expression, clad in the pristine white uniform of the Devilicaon Royal Guard. It was Zaston, captain of the guard and Lala's foremost handler. He was flanked by a dozen soldiers in gleaming power armor, their weapons held at a low, ready position. They were not a diplomatic party, they were an extraction team. Naruto and the three girls stood on the cliff overlooking the beach, watching the arrival. Naruto was back in his black combat suit, his face hidden. Eve stood beside him, her posture relaxed but her eyes missing nothing. Her body a coiled spring. Fu hovered a few inches off the ground, Chomei's dragonfly wings beating a slow, nervous rhythm, her chakra a low, protective hum. Princess Lala Satalin Deviluk, Zaston's voice, amplified by his helmet, boomed across the island, a sound utterly devoid of warmth. Your galactic joyride is at an end. By order of His Majesty, the Supreme King of the Universe, Gid Lucion Deviluk. You are to surrender yourself for immediate transport to the flagship. Lala trembled, not entirely from fear, but from a mixture of anger, guilt, and defiance. This was it. The gilded cage had come for her. Her eyes darted to Naruto's masked face. She expected him to tell her to hide, to fight, to run. Instead, he spoke to her, his filtered voice calm and even. This is your battle, Lala. Not mine. You can hide in my shadow, and I will protect you. Or you can stand in the light and face him yourself. The choice is yours. His words struck her with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't offering to solve her problem. He was offering her the agency to solve it herself. It was a terrifying, exhilarating gift. For her entire life, choices had been made for her. Suitors were chosen. Duties were assigned. Her path was set. Her only act of defiance had been to run. He was now offering her a different path, to stand. She looked at the soldiers on the beach. She looked at Eve, who gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod of support. She looked at Fu, who looked scared but resolute. She took a deep breath, the salt and ozone tang of the air filling her lungs. She stepped forward, her small frame radiating a newfound authority. I will not surrender, Zaston. She called down, her voice shaking but clear. But I will consent to meet with my father, unescorted, and I will not be coming alone. I will be accompanied by my official envoy. She gestured to the masked figure beside her. Zaston's posture stiffened. Envoy. This primitive is he is Naruto, a representative of the ruling house of this world, Lala declared, inventing a title on the spot, but it felt right. He will speak with me, or I will not speak at all. Naruto was impressed. She was learning the language of power. Down on the beach, Zaston seemed to consider this, likely communicating with the flagship. After a long moment, he gave a stiff nod. His Majesty agrees to these unusual terms. He is not a patient man. Come. Naruto gave Lala's shoulder a reassuring squeeze. Ready. She nodded, squaring her shoulders. Ready. He placed a hand on her, and another on even Fu. They come too, he stated. His voice a command. With a silent flash of golden light, the four of them vanished from the cliff and reappeared on the beach, directly in front of the stunned royal guard. Zaston's eyes widened behind his visor at the display of casual, flawless translocation. He quickly regained his composure. This way, he said, gesturing to the waiting transport beam. The throne of the Galaxy Dragon was a monument to overwhelming power. The scale was obscene, designed to intimidate and belittle. The floor was a polished, obsidian-like material that reflected the cavernous, vaulted ceiling, which seemed to be made of captured nebulae. Pillars of crackling, contained energy pulsed with light, and in the center of it all, upon a throne carved from the heart of a neutron star, sat King Gidlucion Deviluk. He was a mountain of a man, his physical presence as immense as his political power. He was young, looking for a king of his stature, with short, spiky green hair, the same devil-like tail as his daughter. His sharp eyes, a brilliant emerald green just like Lala's, were fixed on his daughter as she entered, followed by her strange entourage. He exuded an aura of absolute authority and barely contained volcanic rage. Lala. The king's voice was a low rumble, the sound of tectonic plates shifting. It was not a greeting. You have led my armies on a merry chase across 3-star systems. You have consorted with primitives and assassins. You have caused a diplomatic incident with the House of Brox. Explain yourself. Lala flinched at the sheer force of his voice, but she did not bow her head. She looked her father in the eye. I was exercising my right to choose my own path, father. A concept I know you find quaint. You have no rights that I do not grant you. The king roared, rising from his throne, his shadow engulfing them. You are the first princess of Deviluk. Your duty is to your empire. It was then that Naruto stepped forward, moving to stand slightly in front of Lala. A silent, protective gesture. His featureless mask was turned up towards the colossal king. She has a duty to herself first, Your Majesty, Naruto said. His voice, electronically filtered, was calm, respectful, but utterly devoid of fear. It was the voice of an equal, something no one in this room had ever heard used when addressing the king. King Deviluk's furious gaze shifted to him. And who are you, little spark, to speak of duty to me? The envoy of a planet of mud huts and sharpened sticks. Naruto reached up and deactivated his mask. It dissolved into his suit, revealing his face. His calm, intelligent blue eyes met the king's furious emerald ones. He gave a slight, formal bow, not of a subordinate, but of a fellow noble. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, he said, his voice clear and strong. I am the last prince of the Uzu celestial realm. And your daughter is not the cause of this incident. She is a witness. The silence that followed was absolute. Zaston's jaw dropped. The king's eyes widened, a flicker of disbelief warring with the memory of a name that was legend. The Uzu. The Master Builders. The Star Tamers. The Lost Kingdom, whose destruction had sent shockwaves through the galaxy centuries ago. Uzu is dead, the king said, his voice softer now, but laced with suspicion. My kingdom is dead, Naruto corrected. My people are not. I have come to speak to you not as a primitive, but as a fellow sovereign. We have a mutual enemy. An enemy that destroyed my home, and now seeks to consume yours. He gestured to Eve and Fu. This is my retinue. Eve, a free agent formerly of the organization that built her. And Fu, guardian of this world, vessel of the seven tails, Chome. The king stared, his sharp mind processing the impossible data. The legendary power of Uzu. The name of a tailed beast, known only in the Concord's most ancient and classified texts as planetary guardians. This was far more than a runaway daughter. Zaston, the king commanded, his gaze never leaving Naruto. Convene an emergency session of the Galactic Concord. Now, it seems Prince Naruto has a story to tell. The Council of Kings was not a physical place, but a nexus of light and information. In the center of the throne room, the floor dissolved, replaced by a holographic projection of a vast, circular chamber. One by one, thrones of light materialized. And upon them appeared the forms of the Concord's most powerful rulers. There was the crystalline entity, Monarch Phos of the Silicate Sovereignty, its form a shimmering, multifaceted jewel that spoke in harmonious chimes. There was the Hive Queen of Thrax, a colossal insectoid being whose thoughts were echoed by the 1,000 smaller drones that comprised her body. There was Chancellor Goric of the Reptilian Hegemony, a gruff, battle-scarred warrior king whose throne was adorned with the skulls of his enemies. And there, on his own throne, sat King Deviluk, with Lala by his side. In the center of the circle stood Naruto, alone. Eve and Fu stood respectfully behind King Deviluk's throne, observers to the Galactic Theater. This council is convened at the urgent request of the Devilucaon Empire. The king's voice boomed. We have received intelligence of a credible threat to the entire Concord. I yield the floor to our informant, Prince Naruto of Uzu. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the council. Naruto stood silent, letting their shock settle. Then he began to speak. He told them of the Carrion Star, of its purpose, of its signature. He presented the sensor data from the observatory, the analysis from Eve, the psychic testimony from Chome. He spoke of the Zetsubo, the Star Devourers, the enemy in the dark that the Concord had dismissed as a myth for centuries. He spoke not as a supplicant begging for aid, but as a watchman sounding a warning. Uzu fell because we stood alone, he concluded, his voice ringing with a conviction that transcended the holographic medium. We believed our power was sufficient. We were wrong. The Zetsubo are not conquerors. They are a plague. They will not stop with Earth. They will consume you all, one by one, while you debate and posture. I am not asking for your help to save my world. I am telling you to help yourselves by standing with me. His speech was met with a tense silence. Chancellor Goric of the Reptilians snorted, a plume of steam jetting from his nostrils. The word of a single, unverified survivor of a dead race. The ravings of a tailed beast. We require more proof than ghost stories, boy. Monarch Phos chimed, its voice like singing crystal. Less than the patterns are disturbing, but the evidence is circumstantial. An alliance requires certainty. Greater than. It was a stalemate. They were too proud, too skeptical. They would fall, just as his own people had. Suddenly, a new alert flashed in the center of the council chamber. A frantic, Priority 1 distress call. The panicked, gasping face of a bird-like avian chancellor appeared. Help us, the avian cried, his voice choked with static and terror. They came from nowhere, ships of shadow. They are draining the sun. Our world is freezing. They are ignoring our hails. They are, oh gods, they are feeding. The signal cut out, replaced by a horrifying image. A sun, once bright yellow, now being leached of its light by a swarm of black, void-like ships. Their forms like locusts of darkness. The theoretical threat was now a terrifying reality, broadcast live to the entire council. The chamber erupted into chaos. Goric was on his feet, roaring orders. The Hive Queen's drones chittered in agitation. Monarch Phos pulsed with a frantic, discordant light. Through the chaos, Naruto's voice cut like a blade. That is your proof, Chancellor. King Deviluk rose, his face a mask of grim fury. The Concord is too slow. Its bureaucracy will be our tomb. He looked at Naruto, a new respect in his eyes. I am mobilizing my fleet. What is your command, Prince of Uzu? Naruto looked at the image of the dying avian system. He looked at Lala, her face pale but resolute. He looked towards Eve and Fu, who were already prepared for battle. His quiet life was over. His exile was ended. The mantle of leadership settled upon his shoulders, heavy but fitting. My command, Naruto said, his voice echoing with the authority of his ancestors. We fight back. Form a rapid response task force. We hit them now, while they are feeding, while they are exposed. We show them that the light of this galaxy has not yet gone out. He turned and strode towards the exit of the throne room. His strange, powerful family falling into step behind him. Zaston, prepare a strike ship. We are going to war. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. A Symphony of War. The bridge of the Swift Comet, a Devilucaon Razor-class strike frigate, was a cathedral of silent tension. Its primary viewport, a sweeping expanse of armored crystal, looked out not upon the familiar, comforting star fields of charted space, but upon a scene of cosmic desecration. The avian sun, once a brilliant G-type star, was now a sickly, bloodshot orange orb, its corona flickering like a dying candle. Great, dark tendrils of energy, visible only as distortions in the weak light, snaked from the swarm of Zetsubo ships, siphoning the star's lifeblood with the slow, inexorable greed of a parasite. The space around them was unnaturally cold, the ambient energy of the system so thin it felt like a vacuum within a vacuum. Naruto stood at the center of the command deck, his black star-forged suit a silho. Ute of pure darkness against the dying star. He was not looking at the viewscreen. His eyes were closed, his consciousness extended, feeling the battle space. He felt the Zetsubo swarm as a psychic blight, a region of profound hunger and alien, unified thought. He felt the cold terror radiating from the avian homeworld, a beautiful planet of jade-green oceans and floating crystalline continents that was now beginning to ice over. And he felt the thrum of nervous energy from his crew, his family, arrayed around him. Lala was at the primary tactical console, her usual chaotic energy channeled into a laser-like focus. Holographic displays of energy signatures, structural analyses, and probability vectors swirled around her, her fingers dancing across the controls. She had shed her princess persona completely, replaced by a formidable combat engineer whose intellect was now a weapon of war. Eve stood beside the viewport, her arms crossed, her crimson eyes scanning the enemy formation with a dispassionate, predatory gaze. She was a statue of lethal potential, her calm a stark counterpoint to the cosmic violence unfolding outside. To her, this was not a scene of horror, but a complex tactical problem to be solved. The light of the avian sun is a wound, she observed, her voice a flat, factual statement. It bleeds slowly. Their feeding process is inefficient but thorough. A methodology of locusts, not wolves. Fu floated in the center of the bridge, a few feet off the ground, her 6 iridescent wings beating a slow, steady rhythm. The blue-green aura of Chomei's chakra swirled around her, contained but potent. Her face was a mask of grim determination, her childhood innocence burned away by the sight of a world being murdered. Within Naruto's mind, he could feel Chomei's own consciousness, not raging, but coiled and ready, a great beast awakened for a hunt it had not known in millennia. They are not individual ships, Naruto said, opening his eyes. They held the cold, clear light of distant stars. They are limbs, organs of a single, collective entity. Their movements are too synchronized, their energy draw too perfectly balanced. Destroying one is like pruning a branch. The tree will simply grow another. Lala nodded, not looking up from her console. Eve's right. They're locusts. And this swarm, she highlighted a group of 50 smaller, crescent-shaped vessels, is the primary digestive tract. They're breaking down the raw stellar energy into a form the others can absorb. They're the key, but their defensive energy fields are interlocked. A brute force attack will be diffused across the entire swarm. A traditional military response is illogical, Eve added. It would be like attempting to drown a fish. We must introduce a pathogen, not a predator. Precisely, Naruto agreed. He brought up the main holographic display, a 3-dimensional map of the battlefield. His plan was audacious, elegant, and relied on the unique, almost insane synergy of his team. We can't break the shield, so we'll convince them to open it for us. He pointed a finger at the display. Golden lines of light traced his strategy. Lala, you're my can opener. I need you to create a resonance cascade that mimics the energy signature of a collapsing star. A false feast, but one so rich, so tempting, they won't be able to resist reconfiguring their leeching tendrils to capture it. It has to be perfect. Lala's eyes flashed with fierce, competitive pride. A supernova in a bottle. Child's play. Give me 5 minutes. Fu. Naruto turned to her. As they reconfigure, their primary energy conduit will be momentarily exposed. You and Chomei are my hammer. I need a single, concentrated Biju Dam, tailed beast bomb, but not one of destruction. It must be infused with a specific frequency I will feed to you. A disruptive resonance that will turn their own energy against them, causing a system-wide feedback loop. A planetary-scale EMP blast, but for soul-devouring bio-ships. Fu clenched her fists, her aura flaring brighter. Less than we are ready. Greater than Chomei's voice rumbled in Naruto's mind. Less than this hunt is worthy of a guardian's fury. Greater than Eve. Naruto's gaze fell upon the stoic girl. As the feedback loop cripples them, their hive mind will be in disarray. There will be one central node, a synaptic hub that tries to regain control. You are my scalpel, your senses are the only ones, besides my own, that can pinpoint that node amidst the chaos. You will identify the target. And you, Eve asked, a single eyebrow raised. I am the shield and the spearhead, Naruto said simply. I will deliver the killing blow. And I will make sure we all come home. As Lala began frantically working, her hands a blur, a soft chime emanated from a secure channel on Naruto's personal console. He stepped over, activating it. The face of Hinata Hyuga appeared, pale and strained, from what looked like a secluded alcove in the Hyuga compound. She had clearly been pushing her Byakugan to its absolute limit. Naruto-kun, she breathed, her voice laced with static and the strain of distance. I can see it. Not the ships. The space between the ships. It's not empty. There's a network. A web of something that isn't chakra. It's thin, like a spider's web, and it all connects to a point behind the swarm. A point of utter, complete darkness. It's hiding, a shepherd hiding behind its flock. Naruto's eyes narrowed. A shepherd, a hidden command unit. Their plan to target the synaptic node was sound, but it was a sub-processor. Hinata had just given them the location of the CPU. Hinata, you are a light in the darkness. Thank you. Now rest. You've done more than enough. He cut the connection, his mind already adapting the plan. Change of targets, he announced. Eve, the synaptic node is a decoy. Hinata has found the real brain. It's cloaked behind the primary swarm. Logical, Eve mused. Decentralized command with a shielded central nexus. A classic hive mind defense. It will be heavily guarded. Then we will give it a proper introduction, Naruto said, a grim smile touching his lips. Cascade pulse is charged, Lala announced, slamming a fist on her console. Ready to sing them a siren song of stellar death. Fu, on my mark. Ready, she chirped, her nervous energy transformed into eager anticipation. Execute, Naruto commanded. Lala thrust her hands forward. And the swift comet shuddered. A beam of pure, multi-spectrum energy, impossibly dense and complex, fired from a special emitter she had jury-rigged, lancing out towards the Zetsubo swarm. It didn't explode. It bloomed. It unfolded into a breathtakingly beautiful, silent flower of light and radiation, a perfect mimicry of a dying star's last gasp. As predicted, the Zetsubo reacted. The locust-like ships shifted. Their interlocking energy shields flickering as they reoriented their feeding tendrils to absorb this unexpected bounty. For a single, critical second, the main energy conduit that powered their network was exposed. Now, Fu, Naruto roared. Fu took a deep breath, and with Chome, she compressed a massive amount of chakra into a single, dense point in front of her mouth. But as she did, Naruto fed a complex string of Starforge resonance data directly into the beast's mind. The churning black sphere of the Bijudama was suddenly shot through with threads of shimmering gold. She fired. It wasn't a beam of destruction. It was a wave of pure, resonant chaos. It struck the exposed energy conduit and vanished inside, a virus injected into the swarm's bloodstream. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the entire Zetsubo fleet convulsed. The dark tendrils leeching the sun shattered. The ships, obsidian hulls flickered with purple, electrical arcs of their own energy turning against them. Their synchronized flight broke, ships drifting aimlessly, their hive mind screaming in silent, digital agony. Their network is in chaos. Lala yelled triumphantly. They're blind and deaf. Eve, target, Naruto said, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. Eve's crimson eyes were unfocused, her mind processing the chaotic energy data. There, she said, pointing a single, elegant finger at a point on the view screen, a patch of blackness behind the flailing swarm that looked no different from any other. The shepherd. Time to go to work, Naruto said. He placed a hand on Eve's shoulder. Fu flew to his other side. Hold on. With a flash of gold, the three of them vanished from the bridge. They rematerialized in the freezing, silent void of space, surrounded by the crippled Zetsubo ships. The dying sun cast a bloody light on the scene. Fu's chakra aura protected her from the vacuum, while Naruto's suit did the same for him. Eve, however, began to change. Her body was enveloped in a golden light as her biological systems adapted, her skin hardening, her internal energy core providing warmth and life support. Her trans-beast ability was more than just a weapon. It was a tool of ultimate survival. Before them, the empty space rippled. The cloak failed, revealing the shepherd ship. It was larger than the others, shaped like a monstrous, armored beetle. Its carapace pulsing with a panicked, malevolent light as it tried to reboot its systems. "It's beautiful," Fu breathed, her warrior spirit overriding her fear. "It's a target," Eve corrected. "Fu, suppressive fire. Keep its external defenses busy," Naruto commanded. "Eve, with me, we're cutting out its heart." Fu nodded, and with a joyous war cry, she and Chome unleashed a barrage of smaller, destructive-tailed beast balls. Emerald green blasts of energy that slammed into the shepherd ship's hull, drawing the fire of its automated turrets. Under the cover of her assault, Naruto and Eve became blurs of motion. Naruto created a shimmering platform of golden light beneath their feet, propelling them towards the ship at incredible speed. Eve's arms elongated, transforming into massive, diamond-hard blades. As they approached the hull, defensive drones, smaller, faster parasite ships, swarmed out to meet them. What followed was a deadly ballet. Naruto didn't destroy the drones. He controlled the battlefield. Walls of hard light sprang into existence, forcing the drones into clustered flight paths. Gravitational eddies appeared, pulling them off course. His every move was designed to open a path. Eve was the dancer. She flowed through the openings Naruto created, a whirlwind of black and gold. Her blades flashed, slicing through the drones with surgical precision, her movements economical and breathtakingly swift. They moved as one mind, his macro control of the environment perfectly complementing her micro destruction of the enemy. They reached the hull. The primary neural cluster is located directly beneath this plating, Eve said, tapping a section of the carapace. "Then allow me," Naruto said. He held his hands out, and a construct of pure light formed between them, a massive, intricate drill bit shaped like a spiraling star. He slammed it against the hull. With a silent, grinding shriek, it bored through the alien metal. They plunged inside, into a labyrinth of pulsing organic corridors. Automated defenses, globes of acidic goo and psychic shriekers, met them. Naruto erected shields. Eve shattered the threats. They were an unstoppable force. They finally burst into the core chamber. It was a massive cavern, and in the center, suspended in a web of living energy conduits, was the ship's brain, a grotesque, pulsating sphere of neural tissue and crystal, the size of a building. "That's one ugly shepherd," Fu's voice chirped over their private comm link, as she continued to rain fire on the ship's exterior. "Ending this now," Naruto said. He flew towards the brain, his hands glowing with the light of 1,000 suns. He was about to unleash a full-power Star Forge blast. But the brain pulsed, and from the floor below, a final defense emerged. A perfect, biological replica of golden darkness, but its eyes glowed a vacant, soulless purple. It was a combat doll, grown from stolen genetic data. It lunged not at Naruto, but at Eve. Eve stopped dead, her crimson eyes widening for a fraction of a second as she stared at her own distorted reflection. It was a psychological weapon, designed to cause hesitation. It worked. For a critical moment, Eve was frozen. The doll's claws lashed out, aimed at her throat, but Naruto was faster. He appeared in a flash of gold between Eve and the doll, a shield of light deflecting the blow. He didn't look at the doll. He looked at Eve, his voice soft but firm over the comm. "That is not you, Eve. That is a memory, a ghost. Leave it for me." Eve snapped out of her trance, her expression hardening. She nodded, turned, and flew towards the brain herself, her arms morphing into massive plasma cannons. Naruto faced the doll. "You're just an echo," he said, and with a single, contemptuous flick of his wrist, he encased the replica in a dodecahedron of golden light, which then compressed into a single, tiny point and vanished. At the same time, Eve unleashed her full power. A torrent of white-hot plasma slammed into the central brain. The entire ship screamed a final, psychic death cry that echoed in their minds. "Time to go," Naruto said, grabbing Eve's arm. In a flash, they were back outside, rejoining Fu just as the shepherd ship exploded behind them, a silent, beautiful cataclysm of purple and black energy. They hovered in the void, the three of them, watching the last of the crippled locust ships drift aimlessly. Their hive mind shattered. The dying avian sun seemed to pulse with a faint, grateful sigh. They had done it. They had won their first battle. Naruto looked at his companions. Fu was cheering, her wings beating excitedly. Eve was watching the explosion with a cool, satisfied expression. He felt a surge of pride so fierce it almost overwhelmed him. They were not just a team. They were a force of nature. He turned his gaze back towards the distant blue-green jewel that was Earth. This victory was just the beginning. The war had come to them, but now, they were taking the war back to the enemy. And the universe would learn to fear the fury of a lost prince and his strange, powerful family. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Scars of Victory and the Whispers of Home. The silence of the swift comet's medical bay was a sterile, humming thing, a stark and clinical counterpoint to the psychic screaming of the previous hours. It smelled of ozone from the bioscanners and a faint, antiseptic tang that failed to mask the scent of burnt starlight clinging to Naruto's suit. White walls, gleaming chrome, and the soft, rhythmic pulses of blue diagnostic lights created an atmosphere of detached recovery. A place where the violent poetry of battle was dissected and logged as mere biological data. Victory felt less like a triumph and more like a fever that had finally broken, leaving G behind a profound and aching exhaustion. Eve stood perfectly still on a circular diagnostic platform, her body bathed in a shimmering field of pale green light. A dozen holographic screens floated around her, displaying her biological metrics in the elegant, flowing script of Devilicaon medicine. Her physical readings were perfect. Her energy core was stable, her cellular integrity was at 100%. But one screen, labeled Psych Cognitive Resonance, flickered with a chaotic, deep purple static. Your biosignature is nominal, Lala stated, her voice lacking its usual boisterous energy. She sat hunched over a console, her fingers moving with a slow, deliberate purpose as she analyzed the captured energy readings from the Zetsubo Shepherd ship. Her focus was absolute, a defense mechanism against the enormity of what they had just done. But your limbic system response is loud. The encounter with the mimetic combat doll triggered a recursive anxiety loop. Fascinating and troubling. Eve's crimson eyes were fixed on a distant, blank bulkhead, but her gaze was turned inward, replaying the moment she had faced a twisted, soulless caricature of herself. It was an inefficient replica, she said, her voice a precise, emotionless monotone that was itself a form of armor. Its combat parameters were based on my earliest operational data. Its movements were predictable. Its existence was logically irrelevant. Your subconscious disagrees, Lala countered, not unkindly. Logic is a terrible shield against ghosts, Eve. Across the room, Fu sat on the edge of a bio bed, her bare feet kicking nervously against its side. A medical drone hummed as it completed a scan, confirming her chakra coils were strained but undamaged. Chome was quiet within her, a great, weary beast resting in its den. She felt the ghost of the Biju Dhamma's power in her hands, the exhilarating, terrifying thrill of wielding such absolute force. The memory was intoxicating, and that scared her more than any Zetsubo ship. She had enjoyed it. She had felt a wild, liberating joy in unleashing that much destruction. What did that say about her? Was she just a weapon after all? Naruto leaned against the far wall, a thin, crystalline needle attached to his arm, feeding a slow, steady stream of refined energy directly into his system. The Star Forge inversion he had used on the Carrion Star, foe. Load by the symphony of command he had conducted, had drained his reserves more than he let on. He watched his team, his family, each trapped in their own silent, personal aftermath. He, the prince of a dead world, had led them into their first true battle against the apocalypse that had orphaned him. The weight of that responsibility was a physical thing, a crushing pressure that made the very air feel thick. A report from King Deviluk, Lala announced, breaking the quiet tension. A new screen popped up, displaying a formal communique. The Galactic Concord is in utter chaos. The Avian Psi, STEM's live feed has shattered their complacency. Multiple member states are demanding action. Others are retreating into their borders, fortifying their systems. Chancellor Gorick has publicly accused my father of withholding information and using a supposed Uzu prince to stage a power grab. Predictable, Naruto sighed, removing the energy needle from his arm. The wound sealed instantly with a faint golden glow. Fear makes politicians stupid. They will squabble and point fingers until the Zetsubo are on their very doorsteps. We cannot rely on them. He pushed off the wall and walked towards Eve, who still stood motionless on the diagnostic platform. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. That thing was not you, Eve. It was an echo, a weapon designed to make you hesitate. And it failed. You pushed through it. You finished the mission. That is the only data that matters. Eve's gaze flickered to his, and for a fraction of a second, the analytical mask slipped. A flicker of vulnerability, of gratitude, shone in her crimson eyes before being locked away again. She gave a single, curt nod. He then turned to Fu. He didn't say anything. He simply sat beside her on the bio bed and held out his hand. Hesitantly, she took it. He closed his eyes and sent a single, clear thought to the great beast within her. Thank you, Chome, for your strength, for your trust. He then focused on Fu. It's okay to be proud of your power. Fu, it's not the power that defines you. It's how you choose to use it. Today, you chose to use it to save a world. Fu's lower lip trembled, and she squeezed his hand tightly. A silent thank you for understanding the fear and the pride that warred within her. A polite chime interrupted the moment. Prince Naruto, came Zaston's formal voice over the comm. His Majesty, King Deviluk, requests your presence on the flagship's observation deck. At your convenience. Naruto nodded to his team. Rest, analyze, recover. We have a moment to breathe. Use it. He gave Fu's hand one last reassuring squeeze before turning and walking towards the door, his posture once again shifting from that of a concerned friend to a sovereign prince on his way to a summit. The observation deck of the Galaxy Dragon was a place of quiet, magnificent grandeur. The vast viewport, which hours before had shown the chaos of battle, now looked out upon a scene of nascent recovery. The avian sun, though still dim, had stabilized. The visible tendrils of energy were gone. A fleet of Devilakaon engineering vessels moved through the system like metallic angels, rendering aid to the traumatized avians. The atmosphere on the bridge was one of grim satisfaction and immense, unspoken political weight. King Gid Lucion Deviluk stood with his back to the door, his hands clasped behind him, staring out at the view. He was not in his imposing throne room armor, but in a simpler, dark formal uniform that somehow made him seem even more formidable. He did not turn as Naruto entered. A masterful display of strategic warfare, Prince of Uzu, the king said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the polished chrome floor. You turned their greatest strength, their unity, into their most critical weakness. My finest admirals would have simply thrown ships at them until one side broke. Your approach was art. It was a necessary gamble, Your Majesty, Naruto replied, coming to stand beside the king. They stood as equals, two sovereigns watching over a wounded corner of the galaxy. One that would have failed without the unique talents of my team. And the warning from your daughter's contact on Earth. The king grunted, a sound of grudging respect. This, Hyuga, her abilities are unprecedented. To see the strings of the universe itself, she is a greater asset than any fleet. He turned his emerald eyes, so like Lala's, to Naruto. The Concord is a panicked nest of vipers. Gorik is posturing, trying to form his own militaristic bloc. Monarch Foss has aided its entire race into a pocket dimension to observe and contemplate. They are useless. We are on our own. We have always been on our own, Naruto stated simply. The only difference is now we know it. I am forming a new arm of the Devilakaon military, the king declared, a fire igniting in his eyes. A rapid response task force, operating outside the standard chain of command, with full authority to engage the Zetsubo wherever they are found. Its operational command will fall to you. We will supply the ships, the resources, the intelligence. You will supply the strategy and the victory. He paused, a flicker of something almost like a smile on his face. I am naming it the Star Forge Vanguard. A fitting title, I think. Naruto felt the weight of the title settle on him. It was a crown he never asked for, but one he could not refuse. I accept, he said. Good, the king nodded. He looked back at the stars. My daughter, she is different. Since meeting you, she has a fire I have not seen since she was a small child who insisted on building her own toys instead of playing with the ones I bought her. He sighed, a rare moment of vulnerability. Protect her, Prince of Uzu. Not as a princess, but as the formidable woman she is becoming. I will, Naruto promised. With my life. Back on the swift comet, Eve had retreated to the ship's small, quiet library. It was a space designed for officers to decompress. With soft lighting and comfortable chairs. She wasn't reading. She sat staring at her own reflection in the dark, polished surface of a table, her mind replaying the image of the combat doll. It was a ghost of her past, a reminder of the soulless weapon she had been engineered to be. The door hissed open, and Lala entered. She didn't carry any gadgets. In her hands were two simple mugs, steaming with a fragrant, herbal tea. She walked over and sat down opposite Eve, placing one mug in front of her. She didn't speak for a long time, simply sipping her tea. The doll's composition was flawed. Lala said finally, her voice soft, analytical. The cellular mitosis was unstable. Its reaction time, while impressive, had a 0.03 millisecond lag compared to your current output. It lacked your capacity for predictive tactical analysis. It was, by all metrics, an inferior copy. Eve looked up, surprised by the logical, almost clinical approach. She had expected clumsy attempts at emotional comfort. It was not a ghost, Lala continued, looking Eve directly in the eye. It was a photograph, a blurry, faded picture of a person who no longer exists. You were not that photograph, Eve. You were the one holding the camera. Eve stared at her, the simple, powerful analogy slicing through her logical defenses. The recursive anxiety loop in her mind stuttered and broke. She picked up the mug of tea. The warmth spread through her hands. The tea's aromatic compounds are conducive to relaxation, she stated. It was her way of saying thank you. Lala smiled, a real, genuine smile. And they sat in comfortable silence, two very different girls finding a common language. In another part of the ship, Fu had retreated into her own mindscape. It was a vast, primeval forest. The trees so tall their tops were lost in a sea of stars. In a clearing sat Chome, his colossal insectoid form resting, his seven tails curled around him. Fu sat on one of his massive antennae, leaning against his head. You were troubled, little one, the tailed beast's voice echoed in her mind, a sound like mountains grinding together, yet gentle. I enjoyed it, Chome, Fu confessed, her voice small. I enjoyed the power, the battle, it felt right. Does that make me a monster? Chome was silent for a long moment. We are guardians, little Fu. A guardian's purpose is to protect. Sometimes, protection requires the ferocity of the storm, not just the stillness of the mountain. There is no shame in a storm finding joy in its own thunder. The shame comes only if it forgets the land it is meant to nourish. The great beast's eye, a multifaceted orb of orange light, turned to look at her. You did not forget the land. I am proud to be your thunder. Fu smiled, a real, unburdened smile. She was not a monster. She was a storm. She and Chome were one. The weight of command, the ghosts of Uzu, the future of a galaxy, it was too much. Naruto needed to touch the ground. He needed a moment of peace. Standing on the bridge of the swift comet, he dissolved into a stream of golden light, traversing galaxies in an instant. He reappeared, not in a flash, but as if the moonlight itself had coalesced into his form. In a place of profound and tranquil beauty on Earth. A secret courtyard within the Hyuga compound. Ancient stone lanterns, draped in moss, cast a soft glow on a perfectly still koi pond. The air was cool and smelled of damp earth and the intoxicating perfume of night-blooming jasmine. The chirping of crickets was a soothing symphony. Hinata sat in seiza on the edge of the wooden veranda, her back to him. A simple yukata draped over her form. She had been waiting. You carry a heavy weight tonight, Naruto-kun, she said, her voice as soft as the rustling leaves. She did not seem surprised by his sudden appearance. He walked over and sat beside her. Not too close, but sharing the same quiet space. He didn't have to pretend here. He let the weariness show in his posture, in the slump of his shoulders. We won, he said. But it feels like we just lost something. A battle is never a victory for everyone, she replied wisely, her lavender eyes fixed on the moon's reflection in the pond. It only creates scars, for the victors as well as the vanquished. She turned to him, her gaze piercing, yet gentle. But a scar is proof that a wound can heal. She hesitated, then a new urgency entered her tone. Naruto-kun, I have been watching. Not the battle, but the web. The Zetsubo's network. It is damaged, but it is already repairing itself. But I see more now. There are frequencies, rhythms, like a song. I believe if I study them long enough, I can learn the tune. I can predict where they will strike next. Not just where they are, but where they are going. Naruto stared at her, a new kind of awe dawning. She wasn't just a censor. She was a codebreaker, an oracle. She was finding a pattern in the chaos of the abyss itself. She was turning her family's curse, the burden of seeing everything, into the galaxy's greatest weapon. Hinata. That is, he had no words. She offered him a small, determined smile. You fight in the stars. Let me be your eyes on the ground. Let me watch the darkness for you. He reached into his suit and pulled out the small, hand-carved wooden charm. It felt warm and real in his hand, an anchor in a sea of impossible things. He looked from the charm to her face, her features softened by the lantern light, and felt a profound, aching connection that grounded his very soul. I promise, he said, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't name. I'll come back. I know, she whispered. I will be watching. He stood, the weight on his shoulders feeling a little lighter now. He gave her one last look, a silent promise, and dissolved back into starlight. He reappeared on the bridge of the swift comet. Lala, Eve, and Fu were waiting, their expressions calm and resolute. Their personal demons had been faced and, for now, quieted. A new message from King Deviluk was displayed on the main screen. New orders from the king, Lala said, her voice crisp and professional. The Star Forge Vanguard has its first official mission. There is a neutral trading outpost on the edge of the outer rim known as the Drifter's Nebula. We are to proceed there at once to meet a potential new ally. A weapons master and information broker of legendary, if volatile, reputation. A dossier appeared on the screen, showing the image of a beautiful woman with long, flowing black hair, a mischievous glint in her eye, and an affinity for very large swords. Her name was Kurosaki Yoruichi. Naruto looked at the faces of his team, his vanguard, his family. The board was set. The players were moving. The war for the soul of the galaxy had begun in earnest. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The Drifter's Nebula and the Sword of the Soul. The transition from the sterile, martial order of a Devilikaon warship to the chaotic, vibrant anarchy of the Drifter's Nebula was a violent assault on the senses. The swift comet dropped out of hyperspace into a swirling maelstrom of iridescent gas and stellar dust, a cosmic Monet painting had served as a natural cloak for the station it concealed. The nebula was not a singular, solid structure, but a sprawling, haphazard collection of hundreds of smaller stations, repurposed asteroids, and derelict capital ships. All lashed together by a web of shimmering energy conduits and enclosed within a patchwork bubble of overlapping atmospheric shields. It was a testament to desperation and ingenuity. A city of barnacles clinging to the hull of deep space. As their ship navigated the crowded, chaotic docking lanes, the bridge's main viewport displayed a scene of breathtaking, lawless life. Vessels of every conceivable design, from sleek reptilian warships to clunky, asymmetrical merchant freighters, jostled for position. Holographic advertisements in 1,000 different languages flickered and died on the hulls of dormant ships, advertising everything from weapons-grade plutonium to exotic, intoxicating spores. The comm channels were a cacophony of bartering, threats, and whispered deals. A symphony of the galactic underworld. Atmospheric analysis shows trace elements of argon, neon, and at least 17 unidentified narcotic compounds, Lala reported from her console, her eyes wide with a mixture of scientific fascination and mild alarm. The energy signature of the station's primary reactor is unstable. It appears to be a heavily modified, and possibly sentient, black hole. This place is a monument to terrible ideas that somehow work. It is a nexus of chaos, Eve observed, her placid expression unchanging as she watched a smaller ship get casually vaporized by a station's automated turret for a docking violation. The probability of unprovoked violence is 78.4%. A strategically advantageous environment for a mercenary of high standing. She can control the flow of information by controlling the local chaos. Fu floated beside the viewport, her nose pressed against the armored crystal. It's so loud, she whispered, her senses overwhelmed by sheer psychic noise of millions of different species crammed into one small space. Chome was a low, wary hum in the back of her mind, a great beast suddenly finding itself in a city of ants, flies, and spiders. Naruto stood in the center of the command deck, absorbing the sensory data, the mask of his suit hiding his expression. The Drifter's Nebula was more than just a pirate haven, it was a microcosm of a galaxy without order. A vision of what the universe could become if powers like the Concord and the Zetsubo both fell. It was a place of absolute freedom, and absolute danger. Lala, you have command of the ship, Naruto stated, his voice cutting through the noise. Maintain a low power profile but keep the shields at full capacity. Do not respond to any hails unless they use my specific command code. He turned to Eve and Fu. You're with me. We go in quiet. No uniforms. No overt displays of power. We are traders, looking for a particular commodity. Eve, you are our bodyguard. Fu, you are our good luck charm. And what if we find trouble? Fu asked, a hint of her newfound battle joy in her voice. Eve will handle it, Naruto said simply, a statement of absolute confidence had made the stoic girl's shoulders straighten almost imperceptibly. Unless they find me, then, trouble will have found them. Stepping out of the airlock and onto the main promenade of the nebula's central hub was like diving into a fever dream. The gravity was a low, disorienting 0.8 Gs, and the air was thick with the scent of ozone, spicy alien cuisines, and unidentifiable machine grease. The promenade was a vast, multi-leveled cavern carved into the heart of a massive asteroid, lit by the flickering neon of seedy bars, weapon shops, and information brokers. Beings of every shape and size thronged the walkways, hulking. Four-armed insectoids haggled with diminutive, rodent-like creatures in hooded robes. Sleek, cybernetically enhanced humanoids strode past floating, gelatinous life foe RMS that communicated in splashes of color. Everyone was armed. Everyone watched everyone else. The currency here was not credits or jewels, it was information, reputation, and the implied threat of violence. Naruto had shed his combat suit, now dressed in simple, dark traveler's clothes that would not draw attention. Eve walked a half-step behind him, her dark dress and placid expression making her look like a gothic doll. A facade that hid the lethal weapon beneath. Fu, her wings hidden by a simple cloak, walked beside Naruto, her orange eyes wide with a mixture of fear and wonder. They read the catcalls from dimly lit doorways and the suspicious glares from mercenaries leaning against the walls. Naruto's senses were extended, not in a grand, powerful way, but subtly, feeling the currents of intent in the crowd. He felt the greed, the desperation, the ambition, the fear. It was a sea of raw, untamed emotion. Their destination was a notorious establishment known as the Flash Step Cantina. A name that hinted at its owner's reputation. It was located in the nebula's most dangerous, least policed sector. The entrance was a simple, unmarked doorway, distinguished only by the fact that the two hulking reptilian guards standing outside it were sober and alert, unlike most of the other sentries on the station. The guards crossed their massive vibro axes as Naruto's party approached. Private establishment. One of them growled, his voice like rocks grinding together. Naruto didn't stop. He simply looked at the guard and projected a single, fleeting image into his mind. The sight of the Zetsubo shepherd ship imploding. It was a whisper of cosmic power, a calling card that spoke louder than any words. The reptilian guard's eyes widened in shock and terror. He and his NER immediately uncrossed their axes and bowed low, their previous hostility replaced by a primal, instinctual fear. Naruto and his companions stepped inside. The interior of the cantina was surprisingly quiet and clean. Dark wood, polished chrome, and soft, indirect lighting gave it the feel of a high-end lounge rather than a dive bar. Patrons sat in secluded booths, their conversations hushed and private. This was not a place for drunken brawls, it was a place for serious business. At the far end of the room, behind a long, gleaming bar, a woman was polishing a glass. She moved with a lazy, liquid grace. Every motion efficient and deliberate. She had long, flowing black hair tied in a high ponytail, captivating violet eyes that held a spark of ancient mischief, and a smile that was both charming and predatory. She wore a simple, Backless black top and loose-fitting white pants, an outfit that was both casual and combat-ready. This was Kurosaki Yoruichi, the legendary Sword of the Soul, the proprietor of this establishment and the most sought-after mercenary on the Outer Rim. She looked up as they entered, her gaze sweeping over them. She took in Eve's coiled potential, Fu's hidden power, and finally settled on Naruto. Her smile widened slightly. Well, she said, her voice a sultry, playful alto. It's not every day someone spooks my boys into bowing. You must be selling something interesting. Or you're looking to start something even more interesting. Which is it? We were told this was the place to find a specific artisan, Naruto said, his voice calm and even as he walked towards the bar. One who deals in unique and high-quality enforcement solutions. Yoruichi laughed, a rich, throaty sound. I'm out of the enforcement business. The hours are terrible, the clients have a tendency to get themselves killed before they can pay. She placed the glass down and leaned on the bar, her violet eyes glinting. But I am always in the market for information. And my gut tells me you three are carrying some very, very valuable information. So, let's make a trade. You tell me who you are and why a boy with eyes like a newborn star is walking around my station. And I'll consider not having my guards throw you out of the nearest airlock. We are the Star Forge Vanguard, Naruto said, using the title for the first time. And we are fighting a war against the Zetsubo Imperium. The playful light in Yoruichi's eyes vanished, replaced by a sudden, sharp stillness. The name hung in the air, a cold, dead weight. She knew the name. Everyone in the shadowy corners of the galaxy knew the name. They were the ghost story, the whispered reason why entire systems went dark. So the ghosts are real, she said softly, her voice losing its playful edge. I had a feeling this day would come. She studied him intently. And you think you can fight them? A boy, a living doll, and a lost child. We already have, Fu piped up, her voice ringing with pride. We blew up their whole scary fleet. Yoruichi raised an eyebrow, her gaze shifting to Fu. She could feel the immense, raw power simmering beneath the girl's skin. As that's so, a feisty little firefly, her eyes moved back to Naruto. A victory against a scouting party is not a victory in a war. It's just ringing the dinner bell louder. What makes you think you can win? Because we possess power they cannot comprehend, Naruto stated. And because we are willing to do what is necessary. Talk is cheap, Yoruichi countered, a challenge entering her voice. She straightened up from the bar. Power is not. I've heard rumors of Uzu's magic. The ability to build and unbuild reality. Show me. A demonstration. A friendly spar. If your power is as real as your stories, we can talk business. If not, she let the threat hang in the air. Naruto smiled. A demonstration would be my pleasure. But not here. It would be bad for business. Yoruichi grinned, her predatory charm returning. I know just the place. She led them to a private training deck hidden deep within the station. It was a vast, cavernous space with reinforced walls and an independent power source. The air was thick with the lingering scent of ozone and spilled blood. No holds barred, Yoruichi said as she stretched, her movements fluid as a cat. First one to concede or be rendered unable to continue, loses. From behind her back, she drew her weapon. It was not a blaster or a vibro blade. It was a katana, a simple, elegant Japanese sword. Its craftsmanship was exquisite, but in this high-tech world, it should have been an anachronism. But Naruto could feel it. The sword was alive. It had a soul. It was not a tool of chakra, nor was it a construct of technology. It was something else entirely. A different kind of power. Less than a Zanpakuto, greater than Hinata's voice whispered in his mind, a single, clear thought transmitted across the galaxy. She had found a reference in the deep Hyuga archives, a text speaking of a lost clan of soul reapers, who wielded such blades. Less than its power is not of the body, but of the soul itself. Raryoku, spiritual power, greater than. My girls will sit this one out, Naruto said, gesturing for Eve and Fu to step back. This is a conversation between artisans. Yoruichi smirked, confident. I like that. She didn't wait. She vanished. Not a translocation, but a burst of pure, raw speed. She was behind him, her blade already descending in a whistling arc aimed at his neck. The technique was flawless. It was the flash step. Naruto didn't turn. A shield of interlocking golden hexagons sprang into existence behind him, blocking the blade with a sharp clang. The impact sent a visible ripple across the shield's surface. "Cute trick," Yoruichi commented, already gone, appearing to his left, her blade a blur as she unleashed a flurry of strikes. Naruto didn't just block. The spar, for him, was a diagnostic. He let her attack, his shields manifesting and dissolving with perfect timing, his movements economical and precise. He was analyzing her speed, her strength, the unique energy signature of her blade. It was as Hinata had said. Raryoku. It flowed from her, into the sword, which amplified and shaped it. "My turn," Naruto said calmly. He dissolved into a stream of golden light and reappeared in the center of the room. He held out his hand, and a simple, straight sword of pure, white-hot starlight formed in his grip. The real battle began. It was not a clash of brutes, but a duel of masters. Her impossible speed was met by his instantaneous translocation. Her blade, which could cut through dimensions, was met by his sword of light, which could unmake them. Sparks of violet Raryoku and golden star forge energy filled the training deck, a storm of impossible colors. But Naruto wasn't trying to overpower her. He was trying to listen. With every parry, he sent a pulse of his own energy into her blade, not to break it, but to resonate with it. He was bypassing Yoruichi entirely and speaking directly to the soul within her sword. "I see you," he projected. "You are not a mere tool. You are a partner, a soul bound to another. You hunger for battle, but you yearn for purpose." Yoruichi faltered for a fraction of a second. She felt a strange vibration in her sword, a hum of recognition it had never made before. Who was this boy? How could he possibly understand the nature of her Zanpakuto? Naruto pressed his advantage. He didn't attack her body. He attacked her philosophy. "You think power is about speed, about a sharp edge," he said, his voice calm as their blades locked, inches from his face. "Your power isn't in the steel, Yoruichi. It's in the bond. The soul of your sword cries out, and you use it like a common knife." Enraged and confused, she pushed him back and unleashed her power. "Bankai," she roared, a word of immense, forgotten power. A pillar of swirling violet energy erupted around her, so dense it seemed to suck the light out of the room. When it faded, she was transformed. She was clad in sleek, black armor that seemed to be made of solidified shadows, and her katana was now a massive, serrated black blade that thrummed with a deadly, dark energy. Her speed and power had increased tenfold. She lunged, a bolt of black lightning. Naruto stood his ground. He held up his sword of light, and it dissolved. He was, for a moment, unarmed. He met her charge with his open palm. The tip of her massive black blade stopped a millimeter from his hand, held at bay by an invisible, impossibly dense field of golden energy. The air cracked with the strain. "Your blade is crying, Yoruichi," Naruto said softly, his blue eyes meeting her furious violet ones. "It tells me its name." He leaned in and whispered a single word, a name only Yoruichi and the soul within her sword should have known. Her eyes went wide with shock. Her bankai flickered and dissolved. The massive black blade reverted to its simple katana form. She stumbled back, breathing heavily, staring at him with a mixture of disbelief, fear, and profound, earth-shattering respect. He had not beaten her. He had read the deepest secret of her soul. What are you?" she whispered, the question he'd asked earlier now carrying a completely different weight. "I am a prince without a kingdom," Naruto replied, his shield of light fading. "And I am the only one in this galaxy who can offer your sword a battle worthy of its soul. The Zetsubo are coming. I need your skills, your network, your blade." He did not command. He requested. Yoruichi stood silent for a long moment, her mind reeling. This boy was not just powerful. He understood power on a level she had never encountered. He fought not with his body, but with his spirit, with his very essence. To fight alongside him would be to engage in a war of cosmic significance. It was the battle her Zanpakuto, her very soul, had been forged for. A slow, genuine grin spread across her face. "All right, Prince of Uzu. You've got my attention." She sheathed her katana. "But my services aren't cheap. I want full logistical support from the Devilicaon fleet, access to your Uzu fabrication technology, and a controlling stake in any salvage rights from Zetsubo wreckage." "Done." Naruto agreed without hesitation. And one more thing, she added, her violet eyes sparkling with their old mischief. I want to know how you knew its name. A trade secret, Naruto replied with a mysterious smile of his own. Perhaps I'll tell you after we've won the war. As they sealed their new, volatile alliance, a priority alert chimed on Naruto's private comm. It was Lala, her face grim. Naruto, we have a problem, she said, her voice tight. King Deviluk just forwarded a new intelligence report. The Zetsubo, they're adapting. They analyzed our tactics from the avian system. They're creating a new type of hunter-killer unit. Bio-engineered commandos, specifically designed to counter high-energy abilities. They're designed to hunt beings like you. Like us. A schematic appeared, showing a terrifying, humanoid figure clad in armor that seemed to drink light, its form a twisted mockery of a living creature. They're calling it the Nemesis Project. Naruto's face hardened. Their victory had come at a price. The enemy was not just coming, it was evolving. It was learning. It was creating a predator specifically designed to hunt them. He looked at his team. Now expanded by one legendary, formidable swordswoman. They were a collection of strays, freaks, and last of their kind beings. A prince, a princess, a weapon, a guardian, and a soul reaper. They were the galaxy's only hope. And now, they were being hunted. The next battle would not be a distant fleet engagement. It would be personal. Chapter 10 End. The end. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.